Welcome to Nerd on Nerd with me, Jack Kempster.
And me, Liam Underwood. And today is a special day, isn't it, Jack?
It is indeed.
Why is it so special?
Because we've been joined by Jason.
Yay!
Hello, gentlemen. Nice to be here. This is going to be great. I love you guys so much, and it's been so long since the Kong Skull Island review for Atlantic SC that now I'm glad that I'm sitting down and talking with you guys.
We are glad to finally have got all the arrangements in place to have you on.
Yeah, time zones.
Exactly. Exactly. So, we'll be talking about Bon Cop, Bad Cop?
Yeah,
Am I saying that right?
Bon. So it's like on. You have to say on with a French accent. Bon Cop, Bad Cop.
Can't do accents. I really can't do accents.
No, try Liam.
Bon Cop.
Bad
How's
Cop.
that?
Yeah, exactly. That's good. That sounds great.
Awesome. So we'll be talking about that later on. But before we get to that, it's time for Amanda's favourite section. She sent us a tweet to let us know. Catching up with Jack and Liam and Jason. So let's start with Jason, shall we? What have you been up to lately?
I just got back from a week vacation in New Brunswick with my beautiful girlfriend Leslie, and we visited my parents, which is always great to get into summer vacation. You get to go see your folks, and I basically washed the dishes twice. So the rest of the time it was just this lazy ass, just chilling on the couch, smoking cigars with my dad, occasionally having a couple of drinks. So that was really, really fun. And I was able to visit one of the places I hadn't visited in Canada yet called Hopewell Rocks, which is in New Brunswick. It's a really touristy place, but it's incredibly beautiful. It's must-see for anybody who visits Canada. So if you guys get a chance to see that, that'd be great as well. And it's a place where they have these really impressive rock formations that have been caused by tidal erosion. And, it just looks super cool. I didn't particularly know we had that here. My parents mentioned it to me, and I was like, I have to go take pictures over there. And so it was a 2.5 hour drive away from my folks' place, but it was worth every minute we spent there. And it's one of the places in Canada where the tide actually goes up. I think it's I don't know if it's 28 meters in a couple hours. So basically yeah, exactly, they tell you, okay, it's time to get off the beach. Like, oh no, give me 2 minutes. No, it's get the fuck off the beach. You gotta go now. Anyway, I posted a couple of pictures of that on Twitter. I could send more if you guys want to put them in the show notes. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful place. The sand over there, the bottom anyway, is all like red kind of clay or whatnot. And so when the tide starts coming in, it looks like this blood flow of the ocean. It looks very, very much very bleak, but at the same time, it looks beautiful. So yeah, I got to take a bunch of pictures. That was great. And I've been reading a series of essays on Christopher Nolan's works. I found a book while I was in Fredericton, and it was great. And so I'm looking at trauma and how he uses tricks and whatnot. I forgot the titles of the essays that I've been reading, but I was happy to find that. And I should be reading David Fincher essays, but I'll get to that this week. And now I'm back home. Everything's relaxed. I got to see Baby Driver, which was really fun. But I'm looking forward to just heading back to the gym with a vengeance in preparation for my upcoming semester, teaching the kids that don't want to be there, but I need to get physically fit so that my mental health doesn't wane until Christmas. So that's catching up with me.
I mean, it sounds like you've been very busy for a week off.
Well, yeah, but I mean, because I'm a teacher, you're constantly trying to prepare classes and grading papers and whatnot. So I keep myself busy with shit that I actually want to do. So, I mean, reading essays on film and whatnot is something that I take a lot of joy in. I haven't sat down to read some Star Wars books that I wanted to get to, but, I try to keep myself occupied with things that I actually like doing. So right now I'm just getting back from my parents' place. I was overly spoiled. It was such a fantastic time. We had great weather. I got to play basketball pretty much every day, just to keep the blood flowing a little bit. I think I might have packed on a couple of pounds. I'm going to have to burn that off this week. But anyway, we'll see what goes. And, I drank moonshine for the first time, which is odd.
Yeah, I've only ever kind of seen that referenced in like Tom and Jerry cartoons.
Exactly. but for my dad has this thing that he does. My dad loves like taking things apart and putting them back together, and that doesn't mean my mom.
Okay.
I mean bicycles. And so
Right.
he loves motorcycles and bicycles. Anything that has to do with cars and bikes and motorcycles are like Legos to him. So he just takes that apart, puts it back together, and you've got yourself this wonderful hybrid of a working machine. And you're like, how the fuck did you do this, you manual laborer, you? And so I was with my dad, and fuck, where was I going with this? I have no idea.
Moonshine?
Moonshine, there you go. Thanks, man. That's a long detour to moonshine. And so one of my father doesn't do this, like he doesn't ask anybody for money, but there's a couple of people around the city of Fredericton that know who he is. And so they've asked him occasionally, hey, I saw that you put this on your bike. Would you mind doing the same thing for me? And so the dude, my dad, wonderful guy that he is, he was like, sure, it's just more playtime for him, you know. And so he brings the guy over to the garage and he says, all right, cool, you know, I'll fix the bike, I'll do that for you. And once he's done, this dude shows up and he says, here, I make this. And my dad, without batting an eye, just says, oh, what is this? He says, it's alcohol. And he says, I make moonshine. And Dad's like, oh, you mean like in the Old West? And my dad just takes it and he says, thanks. And so it was great. It tastes fantastic. I mean, there's nothing bad about it. Although I don't know how the fuck he did it. I don't know if he's like Freddie Quell from The Master, where he's draining missiles in order to make some sort of weird alcohol. But anyway, if that was the case, it was great missile alcohol that I had this weekend with my dad. Although it did give me a headache the next day. It was fun while we were drinking it with Canada Dry.
Nice.
See, I'd imagine that moonshine would taste bad. I've always pictured it being like just really strong alcohol.
Not really. It's like the one that my dad had. He put it in a rum bottle, and I don't know if he forgot to take the rum out first because moonshine is supposed to be clear. But this one had this slight, like, you know, yellowish tint where I was like, all right, that's sketchy, but at the same time, you know what? Fuck it. I'm 37 now. Moonshine. I get to say that I had moonshine at least once in my life, and it was cool.
That's cool.
And it doesn't taste much, to be honest. I mean, there's no real sweetness to it. It's just a clear liquid, and it gives you kind of a fun buzz. So, I mean, no, man, if ever someone offers moonshine, you know, be sure that he's all right. You know, if he looks sketchy on the side of the road, you know, just don't say like, all right, cool, because you'd be giving him a blowjob in the alleyway, and you had no idea what the hell was going on. But I think that, if you're ever in a chance and someone says you got moonshine, live the dream, man. You got the Old West coming to you free on a platter, just take it. So, my experience was great.
Fair enough.
That's a ringing endorsement for moonshine right there, if we ever get the opportunity. Maybe that could be like, if we ever get to doing the Jack and Liam try new things.
Yeah.
We'll do moonshine as one of them.
I was actually asking my dad, I said, hey, can you get in touch with the dude? Because I have one of my friends here in Quebec City who's a chef. And I was like, I'm pretty sure he'd love to get his hands on moonshine. You know, I just felt like becoming a moonshine smuggler from New Brunswick to Quebec. And I just give it to my Quebec friend. And then we start this whole scam, Al Capone style, around New Brunswick and Quebec. Would be great. Making no money whatsoever, just getting a bunch of people sick. It'd be weird.
Living the dream.
See, that to me, just like you kind of, the way you described your vacation where like you only had to kind of wash the dishes twice.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like what I imagine Jack's life to be like now that he's living back home with his parents, where it's just like every day is a holiday.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally, Liam. It's not like I go to work and have a stressful job.
Yeah, but then you get home, right? And it's like, well, here's dinner cooked for you. That must be nice.
When he said family, I thought he meant he was going back home to the wife and kids. I didn't think he was going back home to mom and dad.
No, I live with my mum and dad, Jason. It's not quite as glamorous.
Oh, I mean, yeah, but Jesus Christ, you know, how many people do that today? It's fine. I mean, have you ever watched like Seinfeld and George Costanza moves back in with his parents? I'm pretty sure it's not that bad.
So what have you been up to, Jack?
I went to see Green Day at British Summertime, the festival's called.
Yeah.
So I sent out a few tweets, which, as Jason pointed out, maybe had a few spelling mistakes.
No, there's no maybe about it. Like there was definitely a bit of deciphering that had to go on with some of them.
Oh yeah.
The worst thing is, right, I sat there and I got out my phone and I was like, right, I'm going to do a tweet. And I double checked it about 10 times, just reading through, being like, cool, no spelling mistakes, no spelling mistakes. And then I tweeted out, it's just full of spelling mistakes. I don't know what I was doing.
No one does, Jack.
No, it's mental.
Yeah, I like that. I like that you very rarely use the Nerd on Nerd Twitter account, but as soon as you do, it's really obvious.
I like that originally we had our whole plan where we would end every tweet on Nerd with either a J or an L so people could know, but in reality we don't need it, because it's just, if you can't really understand what's being said, it's probably me.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, I was wondering what the fuck was up with Liam. I was like, what the fuck's going on? Is Liam drunk? What the hell's going on? And then it was like, oh, he says someone else is using the Twitter account. I was like, okay.
So how were Green Day live?
Oh, they're incredible.
See, I liked them, and then I stopped liking them when they did their whole, like, they got a bit too much into politics.
The thing is, right, there's a real, like... So, I'm not huge on when bands are, like, super political, but Green Day have sort of lucked out in that they've got a bunch of songs that are kind of like, oh, fuck the presidency, that, you know, happened around the George Bush era.
Yeah.
And now America's voted Trump in. So a lot of those sentiments are shared by the liberal side. So now when they sing them again, you've got a lot of people going, oh yeah, this is great.
Fair enough.
So it sort of worked.
What's the one, like my favourite song of theirs, where the video is them in like a mental institution?
I don't know, I don't really watch the music videos, Liam.
Okay.
Sorry, buddy.
Alright, well, never mind then.
Good story, Liam.
Thanks. That's the one like Green Day song that I really like, whereas the rest I'm kind of indifferent to.
Fair enough.
But if you enjoyed it, that's good.
Yeah, no, honestly, they're worth seeing. If you get the chance to see them live, just even if you don't particularly like the music, like there were a bunch of songs that I didn't know off their latest album, but they're just like, he is such a good frontman and like good at getting the crowd sort of going, and, you know, was getting people to chant along with him. He brought this girl up on stage, and because he was doing this whole, I think in the end he got 3 people on stage throughout the gig.
Okay, a bit like that time I went to see Penn and Teller and I went on stage.
Sort of, but these guys, the people he was getting up, were, he was like, oh, can anyone in the audience sing, like properly sing? So he got this girl up and she sung a whole verse for one of the songs.
Was she good?
Yeah, no, she was alright, yeah. And then, he got another person to come up and sing, this dude who was just so fucking excited to be on stage with Green Day that it was great. Then he got the last one, he was like, can anyone play guitar? And he got this girl up, and he was like, right, all you need to do is play 3 chords. I think it was D, C, and G, right? Which aren't particularly hard chords.
Yeah.
He was doing it in bar chords, which I don't know if you two know much about guitar.
I don't know much about it, but I know what you're talking about.
Same.
Cool. So yeah, he was doing bar chords because they're slightly different. I was like, oh, that might throw her off if she's not used to them. And this poor girl just like totally fucked it up. And it was, I felt so bad for her. And he was really nice about it because he was like, oh, he was like, sorry, it's cool, go back and stand with Trey Cole, who's the drummer. And then he got this other girl to come up and she played it sort of well enough. But so I was feeling bad for that girl anyway. And then he said to the second girl that had come up, you see that guitar that I've just given you? Keep it.
Oh.
And I was like, oh God, that first girl is just going to be like, oh, I fucked up everything.
Shit.
Like, just this fucking beautiful guitar, and he just gave it away to someone that came up on stage.
Wow. But she got to go and stand by the drums, the first one.
Yeah,
so
she probably got
He gave her some drumsticks.
Yeah.
She did.
Not the drummer, obviously, but I mean the ones he plays with.
Yeah. Yes.
So was there any other bands that were good there?
I saw a bit of the Stranglers.
No idea who that is.
You'd probably know a couple of their songs.
Go on, sing one.
No. But they did Walking on the Beaches, Looking at Some Peaches.
What?
Don't worry, Liam. Who else did I
Was
say?
I supposed to understand what you just said?
Yeah, Walking on the Beaches,
Yeah.
Looking at Some Peaches.
I have no fucking clue what the hell that is.
Okay,
That
well,
sounds like
I
the
know
sort
that
of song I make up just to annoy Kat.
Well, look, just when we're done, go and listen to the Stranglers,
No.
Peaches.
My sentiments
Fair enough,
exactly.
Jason. I can't argue with that. Who else did they have? The Damned,
No, don't know.
Rancid.
Yeah, okay, you're an old
they're
punk,
old
man,
school,
right?
aren't they?
Yeah, it was basically like, so British Summertime. They tend to, I think it's 3 days, and they tend to have like one day that's sort of rocky, one day that's pop, and another day that will be a different genre.
Right.
But then this one they had, so this whole day was basically like old school punk bands.
Nice.
So it was pretty. I'm like not hugely into punk, but it was pretty awesome.
Any other bands that were cool? Because I mean, I used to listen to old punk. I know what Rancid is, Tim Armstrong, and I mean, he had another band just recently where they combined rap and metal. I don't remember exactly what the name is, but I used to like listening to Pennywise and Bad Religion, Strung Out, and all them. That was good back in the day. I used to like listening to that. So I don't know, were any of those big names there?
I don't think there were any more like huge names, but Six Little Fingers.
I've heard of those.
Fuck, was there another? I feel like there was another sort of big one that I'm blanking on.
Well, Green Day's pretty damn big there. So's Rancid. I mean, I don't think they're as popular
I mean, Green
as
Day were like...
Green Day it's like they're Metallica level now.
Yeah. That's just such a huge name. They were the one that I think most people were there to see.
Yeah.
Although, to be fair, there were a lot of Rancid fans. Like, my dad was looking around and was like, oh, there are a lot of Rancid fans here.
You went to the concert with your
Fan of
dad?
Rancid?
Yes.
Cool.
I go to all gigs with my dad.
That's awesome.
Because my dad is awesome.
Yeah, I like going to dad too.
Yeah, because I quite enjoyed our little Twitter exchange, Jack, where you were sort of
Yeah,
saying
you
how
tried to have a
were
little dig at me.
What was that?
You tried to have a little dig at me.
It wasn't a little dig.
Well,
It was a rebuttal to your dig.
yeah, I mean, I'm the cool one, Liam.
Right, okay, yeah, sorry. I missed that meeting we had where we decided which one of us would be the cool one.
Yeah, well, you weren't invited.
Okay, so you're the cool one and I'm the favourite. Is that how we're having it?
Yeah, sure, I don't care. I'm the cool one.
I'll be leaving
Yeah,
now.
alright, sure.
I don't want to get into this fight. You're going to put me in the middle. All right, Jason, which one do you think is the cool one? And I'll be like, fuck. No.
Jason, pick your favourite one now.
Yeah, no pressure.
I like both nerds.
Good answer. Very diplomatic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if either member of the Nerd on Nerd team can claim to be the cool one.
No, you've claimed it though. So
I regret it.
yeah, you there at the gig with your dad and his friends.
Whatever. What did you do, Liam?
I haven't done a lot to be honest. I guested on a podcast yesterday called Zack Attack.
Right.
This is the Zac Efron Superfan podcast, right?
Yeah, where they love Zac Efron in the same way that I love Zac Efron. But maybe more, perhaps, because they actually have a whole podcast all about Zac Efron, where they've gone kind of through his career, watching and recording a podcast episode on each film, but they've done it like in reverse chronological order. So
Oh, okay, so they're working to the past.
yeah, so they got up to one of his early films. This is before like High School Musical, which I'm sure both of you are big fans of. I know Jack is after I made him watch it, but Jason, I'm just assuming here.
I don't know. I just think that podcast must be getting creepier and creepier having adults talk about a very, very young guy.
Well, yeah, it got to the stage where they were talking about a film called The Derby Stallion, which is before High School Musical, where basically it's like High School Musical, but instead of singing and dancing, he wants to be a horse racer.
Nice.
A jockey.
Yeah, that's the word. And on Letterboxd, I don't know if either of you use that website a lot.
No.
But it's where you can essentially just log and review films that you've seen. I was the only other person that had reviewed The Derby Stallion, and when they recorded their episode, they discovered my review. So they reached out, and we got to talking, and then I ended up guesting on an episode where we talked about Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure, which is a spin-off to the High School Musical trilogy.
Oh, cool.
Thanks. I don't know if cool's the right word.
I know, but that sounds awesome. I mean, that's so specific.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like Zac Efron could be on his deathbed in 50 years, and he'll discover this podcast, and you will have made this old man a very happy, happy man. They're like, oh my God, had I known before, I would have been on the show at the same time as Liam.
And I think the biggest regret he'll have is he'll be on his deathbed and he'll be thinking, I could have had like 30, 40 years of happiness with Liam if only I'd have known he existed out there.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm getting at. So don't. I think it's very cool that they have a podcast dedicated to Zac Efron.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to record, to be honest.
That's awesome.
And it was nice meeting other Zac Efron fans, because there's not many of us, I don't think.
What do you call those? Are they like Efronites? Are they Zackies?
I like Zackies. I don't know if there is an official... There probably is a term, but I don't know what it is. But Zackies works quite well.
All right.
I think my favourite thing was listening to the episode before, or it might not be the one before you went on, but there was an episode where, like you said, at the end, they had this little bit where they sort of discovered you.
Yeah.
And I think my favourite thing is listening to that episode and them trying to decipher whether your love for Zac Efron is the same as theirs in a we just love him, he's great, or if it's more than that. And they have about a 10-minute discussion of whether you're this creepy guy who's just madly in love with Zephron or not.
Yeah, there was definitely a moment where they kind of were wondering if I would come out during the review of the film. But it's all good. It's a completely honest, innocent love. Like, if he's interested, sure, I'll swing that way for him. But it's a very limited pool of men that I would kind of ditch Cat for. Like, there's a lot more women, is what I'm saying. Like, most, to be honest, women.
I'm sure Cat's happy to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, right? There's a lot of beautiful women in the world, and they shouldn't have to go without me.
Jesus, Liam.
That's awesome. I know who the cool one is now.
So moving swiftly on, we did stuff we did, spoiler-free reviews of the things that we did. I didn't do any cinema trips this week, unfortunately.
No.
So I have no spoiler-free cinema reviews to do. But I've watched 2 seasons of 2 different TV shows, okay? So I can do those, yeah?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you very much. The first one, I did the first season of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, nice.
Have you seen this, Jack?
I have not.
Okay, I first saw it a fair few years ago, and I remember liking it, but like, if memory is recalling correctly, I wasn't a big fan.
Right.
Going back and revisiting it, it is so good.
Yeah?
Honestly, if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. Like, Jason, have you seen it?
I haven't. That's one of my little blemishes right now on my TV watching resume, is that I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, and I know that Larry David is one of the creators behind Seinfeld, and he's actually the inspiration for George Costanza. And I remember being in the same situation you just described, where I had started watching the first season, and I didn't understand what people were so enthused about. However, I did watch an episode recently, and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? I got to get back down to this. So it's actually on my to-watch list this summer. I have to start at season 1, so I'll be catching up to you soon.
Nice. Yeah, honestly, it's so good, Jack. I cannot recommend it enough. The first season, I would probably give 4 out of 5.
Oh, okay,
Nice.
wow.
Yeah, so then because of that, I've never seen a single episode of Seinfeld before.
Okay.
Which I had to rectify it. So
You bought the
I think
block.
in one of the later seasons of Curb, they do it. There's like the whole season about a Seinfeld reunion.
Yep.
So I said to Kat, look, we can't watch any more Curb until I've gone back and watched Seinfeld. So I ordered the DVD box set off Amazon, and I have to admit, Jason, you're slightly responsible for this, because I saw you do a tweet where I think someone was saying what's one of the greatest comedies of all time, and you posted
Right,
saying
Seinfeld. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and I was like, I keep seeing it kind of being mentioned and held up as this like pinnacle of comedy. So I thought, why not? And I watched the first season of that, which is only, I think, 5 or 6 episodes.
Yeah, 6 episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It's really short. But again, it's so much funnier than I was expecting it to be, because I kind of thought, like early Frasier and Friends, that it would kind of suffer with age a little bit.
Right.
But it's actually really holds up well.
Mm-hmm.
I think my favourite episode was probably the stakeout.
Oh boy, I haven't watched that one in a while. Is that's the one when they're in the car with Newman?
No. So this one, he meets a woman at a party.
Right.
And he's there with Elaine, who's his ex, and he's not sure if this woman is single or not. He discovers that she was there with her cousin. He finds out where she works, and then he decides to wait in
and
the
they just
lobby.
say like, Vandalay Industries, they're importer exporters and all that. Yeah, that's a great episode. Man.
Exactly. Oh, it was so good, so good.
I want to be an
I
architect.
love the structure. That line is the one that killed me.
Yeah.
Just when he just adds in, "I'm an architect," and just the look that he gets given.
Yeah, it's
so
like,
good.
fuck you.
Yeah, I think George is my favourite character at the moment.
He is.
I really do.
And that's the sad thing about that show is that, and this is not a spoiler or anything like that. I'm not big on awards, but Jason Alexander is the only member of the cast that never got an Emmy. And he's the show. Everything that you'll see, like most of the show's supposed to be about Jerry and what he's going through, his trials and tribulations as a stand-up comic. But as you get the show going, you'll notice that the show is more and more about George. And it's sad because the stories are so great and he's such a great character, and yet he's never been rewarded for that. And so it's always been a pity for Jason Alexander.
Yeah, I mean, I love it every time he's on screen at the moment. And I've only just started season 2. We've done like the first 2 episodes.
Right.
But so season 1 just so good. I love the kind of like the way it's structured, where it keeps cutting to his stand-up routine. It's kind of drawn from what's happened in the episodes.
Yep.
So yeah, really good. I'd say again, season 1 of Seinfeld probably, because it's so short. I think I'm going to say 3.5 out of 5. But it is
That's fair.
like it's consistently good.
Yeah. And like I said to you, I mean, it's going to pick up starting in season 3, 4, 5. You're going to see it get consistently better. You know, there's an episode that I remember talking about with Sheila online, as a girl I interact with on Twitter. And I said, if ever you had to epitomize Seinfeld in one episode, it would be The Contest. And so I can't wait for you to get that. I think it's episode 1 of season 4. I'm not 100% sure, but it's called The Contest. And I'm going to leave it at that, but it's my favorite episode of Seinfeld. It is wonderful. So I can't wait for you to do that. Once you get to that episode, tweet at me, and we'll be able to talk about it just a little bit. It's great.
Awesome. Will do. That sounds good. But yeah, that's, apart from a couple of things that I'll kind of talk about with you, Jack, because I know you want to mention them, that's kind of everything that I've done this week.
Yeah. I'm the same, Liam. I haven't done much.
I mean, you read a lot of books, don't you? You know how much we all love your book reviews, so...
Fuck off. I started reading Nocturnal, Liam, but I'm only 67% through.
That's one of the ones I recommended to you, though, right?
Yeah, I'm reading the ones you've recommended,
right,
because I'm trying to prove to you that mine are just as good.
Right, okay, cool, good luck with that. Could you give, like, our listeners a little teaser, maybe, of what to expect from that review when you get around to it?
Yeah, got it. It's pretty good.
Thanks, Jack. That's going to keep them on the hook, ready for the next episode. I bet they can't wait now. Anything else?
No, that's it.
That's
Liam.
bullshit, because you know that we were going to talk about Star Trek and Crash Bandicoot.
All right, so since Liam's now got his PlayStation VR, there's 4 of us: Dan Palmer, who has been on the show before, and Tom Hogan, who some of you might remember as the guy that used to do our episode art, which was always beautiful.
It was, and we might have a job for him soon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we need to talk to him about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the 4 of us have been playing Star Trek Bridge Crew, which is an entirely VR game where you man the bridge of a starship. Yeah.
I mean, so Jason, if I'm right in thinking you don't do like a lot of gaming and stuff?
No, man, I'm getting old now. I've lost touch with all of that stuff. I went, when I was in New Brunswick visiting my parents, my nephew lives there, and he was playing Star Wars Battlefront. And I wanted to try that out. He's got a PlayStation 4, and my girlfriend and I are hesitant. I wanted to get one because Battlefront 2 is coming out, and I really wanted to try that out because I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And just getting used to Battlefront, I felt like my dad felt when the Nintendo came out.
Okay.
You know, and he was like, how the fuck do you guys play this thing? He's just jumping around, and you guys are so quick. And, you know, my dad would be like, fuck this. I'm just going to go upstairs and watch, you know, some version of Top Gear that was in the 80s. And that's it. Right now, I'm pretty sure that if I sat down to try to get used to this, I'd probably be okay. Because I used to play a lot when I was a kid. And I loved, I had a Nintendo Wii U at one point, which I sold because it was...
Okay, that's quite recent.
Yeah, it was bullshit, though. I mean, I played Batman on it, and I like Formula 1 games because I'm a huge Formula 1 fan. And that Batman game was great. I had a lot of fun doing that. But now my kids are getting older, and I just have so much on my plate, a lot of reading with the podcast and all. It just, at one point, I don't know when I'd get gaming in. So it's still on the fence about that. So I'm not a big gamer. I enjoy it. Like, I'm a huge Mortal Kombat fan. You know, occasionally, like once a year, my buddies and I will get together and have a Mortal Kombat tournament. And, you know, I used to play at the arcade. That's how old I am now. And so, yeah, I wish I could get back in, but I don't think that I'll ever get to like a, you know, to wear the moniker of gamer ever again. I think that's past now, sadly.
To be fair, I felt like that at one point, and then got sucked back into it. And yeah, now here we are. So has the idea of like VR gaming kind of tickled your fancy at all?
Oh, definitely. It looks great. I mean, when you're a kid, that's exactly what you want. You want to be inside the game. And so now that we're there, I'm surprised it took this long. You know, I remember my dad talking to me about when he was a kid and he looked at the year 2000 and he'd been promised flying cars. He's fucking disappointed now. But at least, you know, I get to see VR before, you know, I get that to pass on. So... yeah, this is exactly where video games have wanted to go all along, in my opinion. So I'm super happy that this is happening.
Yeah, and to bring it back to Star Trek, it's a fun game, but it's quite short, I thought.
So at the moment, it feels like a lot of the VR games that we're getting
Yeah.
tend to be on the shorter side.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's a limitation in, making it VR, they're having to use more space on discs and stuff. But I don't think it can account for... Because, I mean, we finished it in, what, three sessions of about 2 hours?
Yeah.
2 to 3 hours a session, I'd say.
And that's, and we've done now all the main missions.
Yeah. But so...
me and you have both platinum trophied it.
Yeah. So for anyone who is listening and isn't too sure what the actual gameplay is, essentially you're manning... it's not the Enterprise, is it? It's the Aegis, they call it.
Yeah, I think it might be the ship that was in the they did that modern series of Star Trek. Like the most recent one. Oh no, was that still the Enterprise? Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure, but yeah. So basically, there's 4 different roles for you to take. You've got Captain, who basically gives orders.
Yep.
Helm, who steers the ship. Tactical, who kind of handles like shooting when it comes to combat and scanning life forms and stuff that's around. And then Engineer, that kind of dictates where power goes. So if you want the Helm to be able to go quicker, the Engineer sorts that out, so on and so forth. So
or if you want to punish the Helm because the Helm's been pissing you off, you can just take all the power away from him.
I mean, if you're not a team player, yeah, that's what you can definitely do.
It's the funnest thing on the ship.
I mean, bear in mind, there is a captain who should be kind of issuing those sort of commands. So if the captain wants you to punish the Helm, then yeah, you could. But for the Engineer to just take that on his own initiative, I mean, that's not really how crewing a ship works, is it?
Well,
in real life, is all I'm saying.
Well, in real life, Liam, we don't have starships like that, so it's hard to say.
Well, but yeah. So what do you think of it, Jack? Like the game itself?
I really like it. It's one of those ones where it like sort of showcases to me what VR could be. Like the idea that you look around and there are 4 avatars that are your friends and they're all moving. Like we currently have a thing where me and Liam will just occasionally turn around and just do the wanker sign at each other. And it's genuinely one of the funnest things in gaming I've ever done.
Yeah, my favourite is when we do that and we have like someone else who's playing and they're sort of positioned between us and they look up and we both stop immediately.
It's like getting caught in class again.
Yeah,
exactly. That's like
brilliant.
There's just something about, it's weird. The fact that you can look around at people and have those sort of moments where 2 people are focused on their consoles and you can sort of, do some childish gestures. It's honestly, it's just so fun and cool that you're all fucking miles apart but all sitting there in this sort of virtual room.
Yeah. Kat did a tweet saying that she thought it was adorable. She was upstairs working on her blog or something, and apparently all she heard was me say, let's go scanning, really excitedly. Which she just thought was adorable, apparently.
It is good.
What would you give it out of 5?
I think it's a 4 out of 5. It's a shame it's not longer, but it is really fun for what it is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I hope that they do some extra content for it soon.
Just imagine the amount of rendering it takes to create that 360 or more world. That's intense, man. That's a lot of computer generating. Yeah. So I think they're short because of the fact, like Jack mentioned earlier, it's the sheer size of that file, fitting like that.
Yeah.
So possible that they might actually create more content. I think that's what they were doing with, there's a Star Wars game that was coming out where you actually are X-Wing pilot.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Apparently that one's short too, but they're actually working on different levels like Jack mentioned a little bit earlier. So I don't know if maybe they're going to do with the Star Trek one as well.
I mean, that's what that would be ideal if they do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already they've got so you've got this main ship that you're flying for all the campaign stuff, but they've got this other mode which is you just get a random mission and you go and do that.
Right.
And in that mode you can fly in the original Enterprise, which literally is you get a console in front of you just covered in buttons, and the game doesn't label them or anything. You can turn on labeling, but it's just so fun. We played it with Liam and didn't tell him there was that button, and he just had this. I've since sat on in the same role he was in, and you just get about 20 buttons. You have no idea what any of them do. And there was this moment where I just turned round and Liam's character's arms were by his side. His head was just drooped down in front of him. And I was like, oh, Liam, have you given power to engines? And he went, yeah, I have. And I was like, you're a liar.
Jesus.
You don't know what you're doing.
That reminds me of the short Pixar film, Lifted. It's about this young alien was trying to abduct a young boy, and it's his training, and he's in the cockpit of that spaceship, and he's got, if it's not 1,000 buttons he can press, it's got to be more. And so there's this teacher there that's trying to tell him, okay, well, you got to try to choose it. And the kid that they're trying to abduct essentially is just banging on walls and shit because the kid doesn't know what the hell he's doing. So I could just imagine what your experience entering the Enterprise with all those buttons might be. So anyway, if you want to give it a shot, check out the short Pixar film called Lifted. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I do like the Pixar shorts, but I just always forget to kind of... If I don't catch the film at the cinema, I always forget to then go and look for them.
Yeah. Well, that one was paired with Ratatouille, if I'm not mistaken.
I only saw that like in the last couple of years. It was okay. It wasn't like one of Pixar's best. It was fine.
All right.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
It's good, man. It's highly imaginative, but I mean, I don't give a shit about it. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, Star Trek. Done?
Yeah.
Cool. Crash Bandicoot next, I think, was what you wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah. They've remastered Crash Bandicoot, which was like one of my favourite games as a kid.
Yeah.
It's really fun going back and playing it and having it all be nice HD graphics, but it is a frustrating game.
Yeah, I don't remember it being this annoying.
No, I'm convinced that there's some stuff that's sort of gone a bit awry in the remaster.
Possibly,
like there's that level where you're basically riding on a pig and it's just you go left or right and then jump over some stuff. I know you didn't have any trouble with it, Liam, and neither did Dan, but there was this point where you try and jump over this one specific bit, and every time I was like, I know when I'm meant to, I can see what I'm meant to do, and it's just not letting me. I would constantly get hit. I lost loads of lives on it, and I ended up Googling it because I was convinced the game was broken, and just saw all these threads on Reddit of people being like, I don't understand why this bit is so hard. Why is this one jump stupid? So I'm not alone.
You're not alone, but neither me or Dan had any issues with that bit.
Yeah, but then like, I then tried it again a couple of times, and just on one of the tries, it just worked perfectly, and I can see that if you had got the jump perfect and not noticed it, you wouldn't think there was anything wrong.
Yeah. Like, also, we need to say, like, this isn't necessarily a review of the game, because the game features, the first 3 Crash Bandicoot games, and we've only played maybe half of the first game.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So it's not a review, it's just a...
Like, first impressions.
Yeah.
And those impressions are... It's been a long time since a game has made me want to throw my controller in anger.
Holy
shit. I punched my bed, which I haven't done since I was like a kid.
Yeah, Kat was asking me the other day something about what we were going to have for dinner or something, and it was when I was stuck on a level and I was trying to concentrate really hard, and then I got a bit snappy and pissy at her because this game is just that annoying.
Jesus.
Did she take it away from you, Liam? Did she say you've got to go sit in your room?
No, but she did say, can you please stop playing that soon? So I completed the level and then stopped playing it for the night.
Yeah.
Jason, did you want to do Baby Driver?
Yeah, I could basically recommend it. I mean, I had a great time at the cinema. I'm going to be going to see it one more time. I think that this is just... this is by far Edgar Wright's best film, in my opinion. It'll be my favorite of his. I won't say best because I know that some people are going to, get a little offended by that because that's the way internet works. But I'd say it's my favorite of his. It's the one that I'm going to have fun revisiting because there's just so much going on. Maybe not in terms of what the core narrative is about, but in terms of how he mixes genres and in terms of how he's, how can I put it? Everything surrounding the actual narrative is very pulpy and fun. And you can tell that the director, you can tell that Wright is attacking this one with a vengeance, and you could clearly see that, the baby Ansel Elgort character is somewhat a metaphor for how he was with the Marvel Universe and what panned out with Ant-Man. And so you could kind of see these different layers playing out throughout the entire film. And I think it's just too much to take in on one viewing. And so I'm really looking forward to going to see this one again. I've got the soundtrack now, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, fun film. And I hadn't watched anything like this in a while, where I was just not necessarily as invested as I normally want to be with movies, but having like this sheer amount of fun sitting there in a movie theater going like, oh my God, look at how much fun this guy's having. So I thought it was really, really cool for that.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I appreciated the most was just how he put the movie together, like the way it's edited and the way it's like it feels like a musical at times.
Oh, it is, definitely.
Yeah, and I just appreciate bringing that kind of element to, like the crime genre. And I love a good car chase and like car stunts and all that sort of stuff. So seeing those done without like the special effects that you get in like the Fast and Furious franchise, for example, was very fun.
Yeah, getting Vin Diesel to smile is a really interesting special effect.
I mean, it's hard to smile when you've got so many things trying to hurt your family.
Yeah, I guess. No, he's not doing a good job at protecting them.
No. What would you give Baby Driver out of 5?
Oh, that's definite 5 out of 5 for me. The one problem where I could knock a few points off is that, to me, it's very much a cinephile's film. I mean, a person that has an extensive knowledge of film, and I'm not saying that I do, I'm just saying that I have more than average. It's I like taking my parents as a basis for comparison, where they're the average moviegoer and I know more than they do about film. And so when I'm sitting in a movie such as Baby Driver, I see a lot more going on than they would. Now, my mom said it was fun. And when she says it's fun, it's like there were moments where she was like, meh, let's get through this, especially during the second act. I could see that she was kind of zoning out a little bit. She was looking around because that's what I do. I observe moviegoers as much as I observe the movie. Sick fuck that I am.
Yeah.
But and so I asked my girlfriend as well, how did you find it? And she says, it was a really fun movie, but at the same time, she felt that there was something a little bit not nuanced about how like the central love story narrative had played out. And she says, it's something we've seen before. I says, yeah, but it's not about that. It's how it's about that. And she was like, yeah, but to you understand that. But to the rest of the audience that's walking in to see something like this, they don't give a shit. They want to be entertained. And so I was like, yeah, it's a good point. So that's where for me, it's a 5 on 5, but I can understand like an average moviegoer might be like, it was a fun film, but I have my reservations about it.
Yeah, like I do feel like the female character, is it Lily James that plays her?
Yep, Downton Abbey's Lily Jane.
Yeah, I feel like she wasn't given enough to do, really, which was one of my kind of things that I was hoping for from it, that she'd have like more moments, but she didn't really get.
Really?
And yeah, and without going into spoilers, one of the characters, their motivations in the final act confused me a little bit. Like it just felt too plot convenient than it making sense.
Oh, but I mean, if you look at it in terms of how, like you were talking about the musical, like to me, there's a fairy tale fable aspects to it as well, like mixing in with the action genre and the car chase film. I think that if you're going to go all out and make a film that is going to be at once a tribute and somewhat a little bit of a subversion of some of those genres, you're going to have to concede at some point and try, convenience is going to have to play key if you want to uphold a little bit of what the charm of those genres is as well. I mean, if we look at La La Land, which is to me like when I walked out of Baby Driver and I messaged Lee immediately and I said, listen, man, this is a really good film and I think we should cover it for Atlantic SC because, everyone's going to be talking about it. And, a couple of people tweeted and asked us if we were going to talk about it. And I was like, okay, well, there's a bit of demand there. So I was like, that's kind of fun. But I figured that this film, even if it is convenient in parts, there's so much more charm. I feel like this is what La La Land wanted to be in terms of charming.
Okay.
You understand what I mean? Because I didn't particularly like the film, because I feel like what Edgar Wright has done as opposed to What's-His-Face did was more of a very well-crafted homage as opposed to a giant lift of just, cinematic sources. And so... yeah, I'm ready to forgive just because of the sheer imagination involved and how he pieced the film together, as you put earlier. So, a film can't be perfect, and this is as close as they can come for a 2017, slightly post-millennial, world that we're living in now. Like, I kind of understand a little bit more how my students see the world after watching a film like Baby Driver. So that's me. I'm okay with the conveniences.
Fair enough. Jack, is it a film that your go-to see, do you think?
I will see it. I don't know how long it's going to be in cinemas. I might have already missed my main.
No, it
chance.
only came out last Wednesday, I think.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll go see it then.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be curious for your take on it, Jack.
Yeah. No. I'll go see it sometime.
But don't go in with all the hype. You know what I mean? Like I said, for me it worked. And it might not work for you. I remember I was talking to I don't remember who I was talking to, and they were like, I didn't like it at all, and the person felt bad for not liking it because everyone did. And I was like, you can't do that. I mean, hype is hype. Sometimes hype kills films, and so just walk in, expect something. If you're a fan of Edgar Wright, you'll think that he's come back with somewhat of a vengeance. But I mean, just go in with mild expectations and let yourself get pulled into it. It's a fun film.
Cool. I'll definitely go see it.
Awesome. And was there anything else that you've watched recently?
Yeah, I've been watching the Netflix original docu-series called The Keepers, and it's about
I've seen it recommended, but I just haven't got a chance to watch it yet.
It's haunting. It's haunting and it's
what is
shameful
it?
at the same time. It's about a 1969 murder of Kathy Sesnick, who was a nun at an archdiocese in Baltimore. And, just in the 90s, they started piecing together how her murder might have happened because they had gone unsolved until that point. And I think I haven't finished the series yet. I'm 4 episodes in, and it is fascinating. It is fascinating. It is when you're sitting there, and how can you put it? As much as you feel shame for what's going on, you can clearly see that, religion and politics and everything gets mixed in together, and it's very hard. I'll put this as lightly as I can. It's very hard to walk around as a white guy and not feel shame, because you can now see just how corrupt, white men are as a people. And it's very tragic, just the abuse of power. At one point, I can't neglect it anymore. I'm like, yeah, I'm white, but I was born in Quebec, Canada. It's not as bad, and then you're like, I'm part of a collective of assholes. And it's really shitty to be part of that collective and just kind of watch documentaries like that. And you're like, oh my God, the government comes to get me because I owe them $400. And yet there's this motherfucker walking around who's murdered someone 30 years prior, and he's been raping children, and you're just like, and he gets away with it. And you're like, how is that just? How is that fair?
Yeah.
And so I'd recommend The Keepers. It's not for the faint of heart. Sorry for boring from Spider-Man, but I highly recommend it because it's necessary viewing just to see. If you already have your reservations about the Catholic religion, this will cement some of those reservations and then some, where you're like, all right, now this is terrible. This has nothing to do with the system of beliefs that were supposed to really be interesting to help govern people, give some sort of order. But then when you see past the order that they have and how hypocrisy goes into this disorder and chaos and taking advantage of position of privilege, and it's just terrible to see that. And for some reason, I'm finding it very entertaining and informative. So Netflix original docuseries, The Keepers, is highly recommended. And I have to give a shout out to Hermano da Silva from the First Time Watchers, because on their Wonder Woman episode, he's the one who mentioned it because he had liked Making a Murder, which I haven't watched yet. But he said if people liked Making a Murder, they would actually be interested in seeing The Keepers. And I was like, I like Hermano, and his choices usually pretty much align with mine. And I wasn't disappointed. This is a very fascinating documentary to watch. So The Keepers, one more time. Can't recommend it enough. But at the same time, it is bleak, and it is very terrifying. The truths that come out of this, you're like, I can't believe people do this to people. It's fucked up.
Yeah, because I watched Making a Murder with Kat, and we both like that. So this sounds like another one that I think we'll be watching together.
Nice, yeah.
Awesome. What would you give it out of 5?
Oh, so far it's a 5 out of 5 as well. But I don't necessarily grade things. Like, to me, if you're entertaining to me, you're gonna get 5 immediately.
Fair enough.
This is. It's unexpected. After the first episode, you think they're going one direction, and then it swings in a different direction, and you're like, what the fuck? I had no idea it was going down this way, and how naive am I to think that they wouldn't go this way? And so, yeah, 5 out of 5. I mean, this is a very well-crafted documentary. And I mean, like The People versus O.J. Simpson, the documentary that O.J. Made in America, was one of the documentaries last year that I had on my top films of 2016. I'm pretty sure that this year, in terms of TV, The Keepers is going to make my list, because this is very effective investigative journalism, and it's I love seeing this. I love seeing people speak up for the wrongs that have been done. And 5 on 5, definitely 100% for me.
Nice. Awesome. So yeah, moving on to housekeeping. We don't have a whole lot, because I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who got involved, was retweeting the Wonder Woman video, and trying to get it to 100 likes, because Jack promised that he'd dress up as Wonder Woman if our Wonder Woman discussion on YouTube got to 100 likes. We're not there yet, but Jack also...
What are we at?
We're at 16.
I'm going to create accounts. I want to see that.
There's still a way to go. But the thing is, we didn't give like a timeline on when it had to be done by.
No, it's just eventually it's going to hit 100, and then I'm going to have to dress up as Wonder Woman.
So I know Jack at 75 years old wearing a Wonder Woman costume would be great. Like, Jason, remember me? With no teeth.
I mean, I know you, Jason, was tweeting it, so we appreciate that. We had a fair few people actually get involved and tweet that out, so huge thank you to those.
Yeah, I think Amanda and Kat have both been big pushers of getting it liked. I hope that it does eventually happen, because we've got plans for what we'll do if it gets to 100,
nice.
And they are exciting plans.
They are.
We also had a comment on the video where someone said that they disagree with most of the analysis, but thoroughly enjoyed listening to you guys shout at each other.
Yeah, I read that.
Yeah, I think that's sort of our main draw.
Yeah. We had a tweet that really confused me for a while, where Barclaycard tweeted us.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know why. And it was in response to you saying the cool one just saw Stranglers and is about to watch Green Day walk out. And Barclaycard said, "What a great way to spend a Saturday. Hope you're enjoying it."
Oh, it's because they were one of the main sponsors of BST.
So I got horrendously confused as to why. I was trying to figured that out. But now they keep coming up as like a recommended Twitter account to follow.
Do they?
Yeah. And that's annoying. We've been having issues with YouTube trying to copy. We've had like copyright notifications because we used the poster to XXX3, The Return of Xander Cage, in our review for it.
Right.
And I sort of had a little moan on Twitter about how ridiculous it is. And someone said... at DaveK_says tweeted saying, "I'd have thought they would have been happy just to have people interested in what I am sure is a rubbish film."
Good point.
Which is a fair point. I mean, I didn't mind the film, but equally for now, we've just taken it down off YouTube because it's just ridiculous. I think.
But we have plans.
Yeah, Tom, if you're listening, get those drawing fingers ready.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
Also, Amanda tweeted us saying, "Oh, this is great. Jack had some great one-liners in this one. I couldn't stop laughing at his incredulousness at Liam's new DVD number." I read that out to Kat, and she said, "Does that mean that Jack normally doesn't have great one-liners?"
Oh no.
No. What? Why read the negative of that?
I don't know. I'm just telling you what Kat told me.
She's dating Liam, man, so it's to be expected.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No. She definitely thinks Liam's the cool one.
I mean, she's not wrong. And Amanda also said, "Also, catching up with Jack and Liam might be my favourite section, so someone out there likes it."
Exactly. Oh. See, I knew someone did.
Yeah. And we've had an email, and this is an email for Jason. Kat emailed saying, "I'd like to know how Jason celebrated Canada Day and how other Canadians celebrate because I'm nosy."
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, be prepared. I take no part in anything that has to do with nationality.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it's a long story. It's one of the reasons why I chose Bon Cop, Bad Cop as well. I grew up in a small town called Baie-Comeau on the North Shore of Quebec. And because I was an Anglophone growing up in a very small French community, it was a very, very difficult upbringing because I was always the outsider. I was the English guy in a French place. Now, when I was young, I used to travel to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island and whatnot, and that's always been a little bit weird for me as well, because as soon as I was over there, I was the French guy because I was from Quebec. And so wherever I went, I was never really accepted for who I was as either a Canadian or a Quebecer or what the fuck else is supposed to be that. And so it's kind of gotten into my head now that I don't necessarily take part in any nationality, because I've realized that it's just creating divisions. And so people will judge you on where you're from as opposed to who you are as an individual, and that kind of pisses me off. And so I don't really take part. I'll go see the fireworks or something like that, but I decided to avoid that this year. I actually stayed home with my parents and my girlfriend, and we played poker.
Nice.
So that's what I did for Canada Day. No real money involved, just, moonshine. A little bit of Canada Dry, so maybe, encouraging some sort of ginger ale, Canadian fashion, and Canadian moonshine. But no, other than that, I don't take part in anything national because I don't figure it's necessary anymore. I find it's very backward thinking. This whole I'm Canadian. I mean, I didn't participate in making Canada, so I don't know why I should have any pride in being lucky I came out of my mom's vagina here. So it's just, it's always been a weird thing for me. The whole thing where I'm supposed to give a shit about the Olympics every 4 years. I don't care, so I don't do anything. So sorry about that. Poker, moonshine, and Canada Dry. That was my Canada Day.
Still sounds like a good time. I think that leads us quite nicely into Culture Swap.
Just so quickly. This is a little quick one. I'm just gonna quickly do this little bit that I've got to do.
No, it's just you said before we recorded that you kind of wanted this to be quite nice and tight.
Yeah,
you only got like a day to
I'm just gonna keep this
speed
section
things along.
Yep, just getting this section real tight, real quick.
Yeah.
The number, Liam, was on 1103.
Yeah.
Last time I asked you, how many films do you have to watch?
Well, I've actually had a really good week. I watched 12 films in the last week.
Oh, nice.
Oh, cool. So the numbers super down.
So what was the number one?
1,103.
Okay, so it's gone down.
Yeah, it's gone down by 12, it sounds like.
Well, no, because obviously I bought a couple of films, didn't I?
How many did you buy, Liam?
It's down to 1,096.
Okay, well so you bought 6 films?
Yeah.
That's not too bad.
I don't even remember, to be honest.
Fucking hoarder.
I mean, that's the worst bit, Liam, is the fact that you don't know what you've got.
I know, like I'm at the stage now where if I see something in a shop, I'm like, no, I know if I've got it or not, but I can't remember what's arrived in the last week. I think there was a few like low budget horror movies, a couple of like dumb comedies probably,
right?
A couple of like 4K films just because I want to see how pretty they look. So nothing great, to be honest.
Why haven't you made the move to digital yet, man?
It just doesn't work for me yet. Like I'm scared by it. It's all. It feels like every kind of company has their own like digital platform.
Yeah,
at the moment.
I can understand that. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, and I don't like the idea of having to subscribe to like 8 or 9 different places.
Yeah.
Like if there was just one that kind of brought it all under itself, and there's like a nice way of organising it and stuff, then
right.
I'd be there. But we're not there yet.
It's because I'm getting tired. Like I have a total of over 1,000 like physical copies. And it's just taking up space now. It's just annoying.
Yeah.
And so I've switched slowly but surely. I wait for these like $4.99 sales to come on iTunes, and then I'll buy a couple there. That way they have the iTunes extras and whatnot, and that way I don't have to kind of just clog up my living room with more shit. But I mean, I'm lying because I've been buying Star Wars figures, so it's basically I could have been doing movies instead. But no, I just decided to encourage Disney a little more. But I don't know. I'm content with digital. My only preoccupation with it is that if ever Apple goes tits up, do I get my movies? I think that's the one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about. But so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we moved late last year, and we're looking at moving again this year. And it was, I think, on last count, I have maybe like 2,000 films or so on like DVD or Blu-ray.
Nice.
And it honestly just... It was boxes after boxes of them. It was horrible packing it. And they were...
Does that include the unwatched ones, Liam?
Yeah.
So you haven't watched half your DVD collection?
Well, no. Okay, I know since starting Letterboxd, which was maybe like January 2013,
Yeah.
I can tell you that. Oh, this is including cinema trips and rewatches, which, to be honest, there's not a lot of. Once I've watched a film once, I don't tend to go back and revisit it unless it's really good. So in the last 4 years, I've watched 1,205 films.
That's nice.
It's ridiculous.
And then add that to the 1,000 that are still to watch, and but knock maybe 50 to 100 off. That's probably the amount that I own.
Oh, it's insane.
Yeah.
Jason, you're the first guest we've had on since I've started regularly remembering to do this.
Right.
What is your opinion on Liam having 1,096 films that he has bought?
Oh, I think it's great.
It's weird because it's not that he's not watched.
I think it's great. I understand. To me, that's planning for retirement. I completely understand that. So
Fair enough.
I do the same thing, to be honest. I have maybe a 10 or 15 Criterion films that still have their wrappers on them, but I know I'm going to get to them eventually, but I'm glad that they're there, I have a couple of other DVDs that I remember buying back in the day, at a video store when those were still around, because I can't find any anymore, where they used to come on sale sometimes. So you could buy 3 for $9.99 on DVD. And so I still have some of those, some films that I haven't watched yet that I'm like, you know what? Sometime I'll probably be in some weird, state at one point. I'll be like, oh, yeah, I really feel like watching that old German film. That'd be interesting. So exactly. I have it. So it's not a big deal for me. Instead of going to hunt for it, I know where it is. I mean, I just look at it's on the second shelf in back of the Pixar films. I know exactly where it is. And so if anyone asks,
that's fair enough.
They'll, do you know what that movie is? It's like, yeah, I have it. I haven't watched it, but I know what it is. So
about 2 years ago, I think maybe Barnes and Noble were doing half price Criterion.
Yeah.
And I got excited and carried away and ordered about 30 of them.
Nice.
And I think in the last 2 years, I've maybe watched 5 of them.
You got to be in a specific mood to watch Criterion, to be honest. I mean, they're all really good films, but there are some times that you question their judgment a little bit, and you're like, really? Why is this being preserved? But
exactly.
I don't know. There's sometimes it's a little bit hit or miss for me. Sometimes I'll be glad that I watched a specific film, but I hate it. Like The Friends of Eddie Coyle. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you don't like that movie?" And I was like, "No, it's fucking boring. I fell asleep 3 times watching it on my initial viewing. That doesn't bode well for a second viewing, And so, but I mean, I fell asleep 3 times watching Seven Samurai, as I mentioned on when we did the podcast for that one, and I love that movie.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I kind of had to wait until I had a day off work. Kat was at work, so I had no distractions, and I could just dedicate an entire day to doing that movie.
Right, and that's exactly what you need, in my opinion. I mean, I did a lot of research to understand a little bit of what was going on in the film as well, and I mean, now that I've got through it completely, I understand why it has that status as a masterpiece. It is wonderful.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ, is it ever 3 hours and 20 minutes is a slog to sit through. And I don't have trouble. I'll watch The Godfather and not blink, but Seven Samurai will put me to sleep, because I don't know if it's because it's subtitled and there's a lot of information coming in at once, or is it just, okay, we have to get through this part of recruiting the people and So I don't know. It's fantastic anyway. I can't recommend it enough, but I mean, at the same time, I can't get my girlfriend to watch it. She'll be like, you know what? I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So. No problem.
I like it when,
no problem.
When a Criterion movie is a nice little surprise. Like there's some that I just know I'm going to like 12 Angry Men. I watched that not too long ago for the first time, and just, absolutely fell in love with it. But then there's definitely others where I've stuck it on, not really knowing a whole lot about it.
Right.
And then just there's a film called House.
I haven't watched it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, this Japanese oddball movie, and you just stick it on not knowing anything about it, and it then just completely blown away by it.
Okay. I had that recently. One of my other Twitter friends is Andrew from the AB Film Review down in Australia, and I was wondering what I should buy, because I had just recently gotten my gift card from Criterion. I mean, when you buy $500, they give you a $50 gift card, because they're like, well, you seem to want to spend more. And so the $50 the 50% flash sale came on, and I was like, oh, what should I get? There's a couple I wanted. I wanted to get Charlie Chaplin's Limelight because I hadn't seen it in years, and it's wonderful. And I was wondering what I wanted to get as well, and so he recommended I get Lady Snowblood and Asphalt Jungle. And Lady Snowblood I watched 2 weeks ago for the first time, and I loved that picture so much. I wasn't expecting that at all, where where Tarantino lifts a little bit, his tributes and homages come from specific places. And I'd heard the name Lady Snowblood thrown around here and there, but just sitting down to watch it and seeing like, oh, this is that scene. This is where he takes this. This is beautiful. Yeah. And it was super well made. I loved it. I loved how like it was inspired by the Japanese manga, and yeah, it was just wonderful. I loved every minute of it. It was a beautiful, beautiful film. One of those rare Criterion surprises for me.
Definitely, yeah. I think because Criterion like don't ship outside of the States and Canada, which is a bit disappointing for me. And we also don't get their like streaming service, which I think is called Filmstruck.
Yeah, I don't have it in Canada either.
Yeah, I think if I could get hold of it, that would be like my first step to going digital, I think.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I really like, I don't know if, so there's a woman who does like a lot of YouTube reviews and like press junkets and stuff called Alicia Malone, who also does a lot of the stuff for Filmstruck.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, one of my like favourite people to watch talk about films. Absolutely love her. Mm-hmm. So I every Friday she'll recommend 3 movies from the Criterion library.
Nice.
And that just always ends up kind of adding to my wish list.
Yeah, I mean, and Alicia's she's a smart pundit. She's very classy. I think that's what I appreciate about her. She's very knowledgeable. And it's kind of fun to see that, she came from Australia and she started making a name for herself in the United States, especially through, her collaborations with Screen Junkies and also with Fandango and whatnot. But I mean, to see her go up the ranks, I mean, this is she'll eventually become a Barbara Walters type person where everyone's going to want to meet her. And it's just wonderful to see this very knowledgeable person, like to have such poise and class. It's such a fun thing. Alicia Malone, I can't, no, there can't be too much praise heaped on that fantastic woman. I love her so much. Yeah,
I agree entirely. Yeah. All right, culture swap.
Swap my culture.
Thank you very much, Jack. So I think I'm going to let Jason kind of talk about, sort of set this up as to kind of an overview of what it's about and also why you chose this.
All right. I suggested we do a real culture swap in that we should watch a film from where I'm from in Quebec, Canada. Because I could have gone with so many great Canadian films, but no. I decided to go for a film that could have only been made in Quebec for a Quebec audience. So I chose 2006's Bon Cop, Bad Cop, a film directed by Éric Canuel that stars Patrick Huard and Combe Fior. Just because I figured that if we were going to do a real culture swap, this is where I'm from, this is the anxieties that these people go through. And it is one of the movies that I had a little bit of trouble with on my initial viewing. When I saw it back in 2006, I was very angry at the picture. But when I watched it again yesterday, I don't know if, like I was saying to you guys, if I had matured and had calmed down a little bit more, or I had just basically said to myself, "Oh, this actually makes sense. It's not a bad picture. It's not a great picture either." But I thought it showed what Quebec what was at a point. I mean, they're still living this at this moment in time. So I chose the film because it's predominantly preoccupied with a lot of the socio-cultural anxieties that I witnessed growing up while I was in Quebec. And so I'm looking forward to delving into it. It gave me a bigger appreciation for the film, although I don't think the director knew what the hell he was doing.
I'm pleased you handled the names there, because I would have absolutely butchered the pronunciations.
What did you guys think of the film? Let's get to that first, and then we'll get into the more nitty-gritty crap.
Jack, do you want to start?
So I enjoyed it. I think it's a good sort of buddy cop sort of comedy. There's very obviously comedic scenes and stuff, which I thought were quite good. A lot of the stuff landed. I thought it was interesting seeing a film that was, half French and half English language-wise.
Right.
That's unusual. I don't think I've particularly seen a film where I've got to watch it because I need the subtitles for the French part, or for one part of it, but then, fully understand another part without it. So that was a bit weird, but also interesting.
Right.
But yeah, no, like, it wasn't a great film, but it was enjoyable for me.
See, I found myself enjoying it a lot more than I thought, because you didn't really sell it to me, Jason, to be fair, because I think when you first said this is what I wanted for Culture Swap, you said it's not a film that I particularly like.
Yeah, I don't particularly like
it. Yeah, so I was like, okay, here we go. But yeah, I actually found myself getting really into it and quite enjoying. Like, I like a good sort of buddy cop type movie. I appreciated the comedy in this, and I did like that sort of that clash at the centre of it between these two different, like the way they embody the two different characters by kind of with the locational differences and the language differences,
right?
And just the way they're kind of put forward. Because I feel like with buddy cop movies, you always have that like that difference there. Like if you look at something like Lethal Weapon, for example.
Good, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, but this just has a much smarter way, I think, of showing of like bringing those differences to the screen.
Okay.
So yeah, I found myself really enjoying it a lot more than I was expecting. And I didn't really like overthink about what I would get from it. And I've never seen a film from Quebec before, which is definitely something that I wanted to do at some point. So I'm pleased I finally have an excuse to.
Cool.
But I just love the fact that hockey was such a central focus to this movie.
It's one of the things that I hated the most, but we'll get into that later.
I just thought it was so like, I was just like, oh yeah, of course. Why wouldn't it be?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
To me, like, why go with the entire stereotype that, it's hockey? I was like, fucking hell, guys. Don't you guys have anything else to talk about?
Yeah, I thought it was quite funny. Because I've been to Canada, like, a long time ago. I was in a long-distance relationship with someone who was in Canada, and at this time I was living at home and working full-time.
Right, what's his name?
So I could just afford to...
I'm kidding.
I'll just let that fly. Yeah, I could afford to travel over there. I think I visited like 4 or 5 times in a year. So that was fun. And also I've been like skiing with my mum over there a few times as well.
Cool.
So I kind of have like a little kind of amount of experience with the culture.
Right.
But never like Quebec or anything.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously being from here, like, my opinion is clearly is biased. Like, given what I had mentioned a little bit earlier with my upbringing in Quebec, but I mean, not necessarily identifying with the culture and being forced to not identify with the culture and then going outside of Quebec and again being told, well, you're from Quebec, and I'm like, well, they told me I wasn't. And so it's always been a little bit strange to me, and especially growing up in a small town like Baie-Comeau, and even now living in Quebec City itself, the Anglo-Franco rivalry is something that is very present. And it's one of these things that's just hovering over the culture where you're like, why can't you guys acknowledge that there is a part of the English history that is also part of your history? There's a lot of laws that have been passed for language here in Quebec that, if I hadn't been privy to go to the English school because my mom was an Anglophone, then my kids couldn't go. There are laws like that here that, like, they serve to protect the language. However, when these laws were installed in the late 70s, which was Bill 101, I even had a student this semester come talk to me about it because this is something that I lived through, and my mom too, which was like, she was like pretty much a victim of language racism, if you will, when she was growing up in Baie-Comeau. People used to throw rocks at them and tell them, like, get the fuck out of here, you Anglophones, And people used to swear at me, they look at you weird. Sometimes even here in Quebec City, if I'm speaking English to my kids, I get this look. It's like, fuck, I only thought they existed on TV,
So, like, for someone who knows nothing about like the history of this, where did this divide like start?
Oh, this is 400 years ago, man.
Okay,
Yeah.
and was there like a something that ignited this? Or...
Well, I mean, like the French had come over and they started like colonizing the what they call Upper Canada and Lower Canada, and then the British and anybody who was coming from the States, essentially after the Civil War, had decided to the Loyalists coming up towards like the Maritimes and New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, So you had all these people that were kind of wanted to stay affiliated to the crown, but a lot of the English decided to fuck off. They decided to leave, essentially. And the same thing happened with a lot of the French. So they decided to stay here, but because it was predominantly an English place surrounded by these small French colonies, the French were constantly trying to not be suppressed. So I think the English actually started this rivalry by treating the French like shit. But now we've gone like 180 degrees where you have this grudge that's being held against the crown, essentially, where you're like, okay, we have to kind of sit down and talk about how this reflects on the culture in general. Because the student that I had this semester was really fun when she started realizing, when she started piecing together that the laws that they put together at the end of the 70s weren't necessarily laws that would protect the French language. It would actually be laws that would actually kind of eradicate every other language that was here. So essentially part of the Quebec culture that was English is slowly being kind of weeded out. And so a lot of the schools here in Quebec, especially the schools that I went to when I was a kid, they were already small. I mean, you'd have a population in Baie-Comeau that was about roughly 28,000 people. But in there, you'd have maybe a school which had like 300 or 400 Anglophone students, and the same amount in a French school. But after the laws were passed, you'd see those numbers slowly dwindling because you didn't have like an Anglophone grandfather or grandmother. So people that were Francophones that wanted their kids to learn English weren't allowed to send their kids to English schools anymore. And so they slowly started weeding out all that. And I mean, right now, the school that I used to go to, I think they have 60 students now. And that's from kindergarten to high school. Right? This is not just elementary. This is, and so the schools, they're barely staying open. And so you have these very...
how many is that in a class then?
3 sometimes, man.
Right, okay.
Which is, great for funding.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I'm a little biased when it comes to this because I've been caught in the middle of this Anglo-Franco rivalry, and I didn't necessarily understand it much. And obviously, my affiliation is more on the Anglophone side. The way I process information is more English than it is French. My English is much better than my French is. Even if the people are listening to this and be like, this guy sounds like he has a French accent, I'm like, fuck you. Sorry, I live in Quebec City, so there's clearly going to be some seepage. But it's very strange sometimes to live in a place like this that I won't say it's backwards thinking, but it is kind of a weird gated community where a lot of stuff happens inside, but they don't let a lot of information from outside come in. And that's where I think that Bon Cop, Bad Cop is a really good example of where Quebec is. As progressive as they can be, you'll have these giant stars that are going to come out like Cirque du Soleil, or you're going to have Céline Dion, or even just recently guys like Denis Villeneuve, who's gone on to Hollywood and direct films. You have these monuments. But the mentality in Quebec is if they've succeeded, it's because they're corrupt. There's something wrong with them, where you're like, what the fuck, because there's a very socialist mindset here, although it's backed by American capitalism, which is a dichotomy in and of itself. So,
yep, that's unusual.
It is, yeah. People are like, let's stick together. And then after that, you're like, but not with them.
We should also mention that there will be spoilers for this film.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So how was this film kind of received?
This is actually one of the biggest grossing films, not only in Quebec, and I think in Canada. It had an $8 million budget, which is essentially the same budget as Pulp Fiction back in '94. And it was very, very well received. I forgot to check the numbers, but I know that it was a box office hit here in Quebec because Patrick Huard, the guy who plays David Bouchard, is first and foremost a stand-up comedian. He's a guy who, he was a stage act who went to because here in Quebec they have a national institute for comedy where you can actually go to school and study to be a comic. And a lot of the comedians that perform here in Quebec will actually go through that school. And he was one of the graduates there. And he made a name for himself being a stand-up comic first and foremost. And because he was such a popular presence, and he's always, like, if you talk to him about film, he is a film buff. He loves movies a lot. I used to work at HMV down on Peel in Montreal, and he would be a regular customer. He'd come in and buy a fuck ton of DVDs and then leave. And he's also a collector. I don't know if it's action figures or anything like that, but one of my buddies used to work in a statuette and action figure store, and he'd walk in occasionally, look around, and try to pick a few things out. So I don't want to assume that that's what he was doing there, but from a story, from a mouth, that I know very well, one of my best friends said that he would come in and buy a couple of things every now and then.
Oh, fair enough.
And so, he used to do a lot of sketch comedy, and he had a lot of characters that he'd created that a lot of the population had grown to like. And, I mean, he is a funny guy. I mean, you can see him in the movie. You can tell that he has this physical presence. He knows what he's doing. Yeah. And I appreciate him as an actor. But it had always been he'd done comedy in order to get into film. He'd always wanted to be a director. He did direct a film called Les Trois Petits Cochons, so the Three Little Pigs. You can check that out. That's a film directed by him. I don't know if he directed the second one, but he is a big name in Quebec.
Okay.
I did quite like the sort of his performance and the way that was juxtaposed with what's the guy's name?
Comfior, so he's going to be Martin Ward.
Yes, that guy. So he's very like straight-laced in comparison to this guy who's a lot more
unhinged.
Hot-headed.
Yeah,
I think.
That plays into a stereotype that Quebecers believe about the outside, in my opinion. And so Quebec has always seen itself as the, how can I put it, less stuck-up version of Canada, the more risk-taking type of people and whatnot, a little bit more brash. And I think it really depends on where you travel to, because the rivalry that we see in the film is very much Quebec and Ontario. So we have, going back 400 years, Upper and Lower Canada,
Yeah.
And so you can tell just about what's going to happen in the approach when you see them at the border looking at the body that's fallen on the sign, which I thought was a brilliant way to have these two meet, where you're like, really?
Yes.
You're just staring at it like, all right, what's the jurisdiction? And you have that conversation about tennis and then the 100-meter dash, and you're like, all right, there.
Yeah, all the different sport rules.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. But what I thought really represented Quebec is the how can I put it? The rudeness with which David actually engages with Martin, first and foremost. Martin is going to be a guy that does things by the book, which you're supposed to be doing when you're a cop. And he says, like, Martin Ward. And then the other guy just mocks him as David Butchard. And that's pretty exemplary of what Quebec does. When people, like, they say that during the movie at one point, you'll have him say, you'll have Martin talk about Susie, who happens to be David's ex-wife. And he says, I had heard about Quebec hospitality, but I never thought it was this nice.
Yeah.
And to me, that rings true with an asterisk, where you're like,
okay,
yeah, it is. It is to people who come here, like, let's say from France or from England or from Spain, or, people that are from the outside and they're going to Montreal, then yes. If they're coming to Quebec City, depending on the season, then yes. But for people that actually live here, that are of a different culture, it is a very different message. You know what I mean? So let's say Liam was to come here to Quebec, and he'll be like, oh, they've got a British accent. That is cool. But if I just speak English and I'm from Quebec, then I'm a threat. I'm something to be feared.
Yeah.
So it's always a bit weird for me to have that, like, well, why him? Well, I was like, well, he's not from around here. Well, yeah, but shouldn't you be nicer to the people that actually live here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was interesting. That's where I had a little bit of trouble when I was like, oh, come on, man, just say David Bouchard. Can't you just be a nice guy? You haven't met this guy, and just because he's wearing a turtleneck, well, he's wearing his tie in that scene. You don't have to be rude to him.
I definitely got the impression that David kind of comes across as a lot more hostile, at least at the start.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I didn't really know if there was like a reason for that. Like, I'm sure this film is working on a deeper level that I'm completely overlooking because I'm just not familiar enough with the culture.
Right. Oh, there is, yeah, definitely. I mean, the if you look at what we were talking about in terms of the Anglo-Franco rivalry, to me, when I was watching it this time, I tried to keep my mind open to see exactly what the themes were. And the theme itself is one that's very much a Quebec theme, and it's one that's division and separation. And so since the late 1970s, Quebec has been on a huge quest for independence, which literally translates as a separation from the rest of Canada. And so being that the central theme of the film, you look at both families are divorced, so in terms of separations inside the families as well, the fathers are not necessarily connecting with their children, And I thought that it was really interesting to see that time. I'm like, okay, they're still talking about Quebec's independence or the separation, but what separation also means to Ontario and what it means to Quebec. What does it mean to separate these two facets of English and French? And so I always thought that one of the key sentences in the film was Martin Ward when they're just after the car blew up and they're having basically another conflict, and he's you'll have David that's trying to get the food. It was after the house explodes and he's got the munchies because they're like the pot basically is burning through the entire house and they have to leave cold brew inside. He's trying to get the munchies out of the machine, and Martin Ward says to him at one point, "Je me souviens," which literally translates to "I remember" in English, which is plastered on our license plates here in Quebec. And he says that's the problem with Quebec, is that it's constantly living in the past. And he's 100% right, and they made the film in 2006 about something that happened in the 90s. We're talking about the hockey, what he did there. And they haven't gotten over it yet, the idea that they've lost the hockey team, the fact that they haven't gained their independence, although they've broken away from the Commonwealth because the laws in Quebec are clearly different than the laws in Canada. Anything that has to do with legislation and whatnot goes through the Quebec government and doesn't necessarily have to abide by a lot of Canadian laws that they have as well. I'm not saying that murder isn't, I'm just saying like basic laws will probably adopt a little bit more from France or the legislation that they've tried to put forth over the course of their history than the one in Canada. And so the Anglo-Franco rivalry will go as far as to having the two teams here in Quebec. You'll have the Montreal Canadiens versus the Quebec Nordiques. That has always been a rivalry because those two cities can't necessarily get along either. And it's because Montreal has always been a little bit bigger, a little bit more international. People will visit that place more, even though Quebec City is actually the capital of Quebec, And there's a bigger English population in Montreal than there is in Quebec City. And we're talking about 230 kilometer difference, but the threat is always there when you talk about like, oh, English is a threat to Quebec and how the culture of Quebec is threatened by, this looming Anglophone presence. And even if you shoot statistics at them and say like, well, yeah, but the English population of Montreal is less than 12%, you're like, you're not threatened at all, and plus learning a second language is kind of beneficial. Get with the program.
Yeah, that was one of the things that when I first visited, I found it just completely blew my mind, was how like all of the food packages and stuff have like English and French, like all of the signage everywhere. Like growing up here where it's just English all the time,
right?
It just completely threw me that was just a thing that existed.
Right. Where did you visit again?
It's just so common. So it was Toronto and that sort of area mostly. Okay,
and that was the signage was English and French?
Yeah.
Great, because that is in New Brunswick as well. But there was a law that was passed, if I remember correctly, I think it's got to be at least 30 years ago. No, not 30, roughly 30 years ago, where the signage in Quebec was going to be, they made French the official language of Quebec and not English anymore. And so all the signage in Quebec now is French.
Oh, okay.
And because English Canada, Canada itself is supposed to have two official languages, and that's the law. But because Quebec has their own laws, they're allowed to pull this off. And so when you're traveling from Ontario to Quebec and then going to the Maritimes, it's just this weird thing where you're like, oh, English, French, that's great. Did you get to Quebec? And you're like, I don't understand shit. And then you go to New Brunswick and you're like, okay, back to understanding again. I'm glad I didn't get lost.
Yeah.
So that is a very, very strange thing where we're like, well, don't encourage it, because I remember it was fun on stop signs. It said arrêt and then stop. And now it just says arrêt. And they just assume, well, if they see this hexagon, the red hexagon, it'll be fine, And so I was like, all right. But Yeah, the hockey rivalry is one that we talk about in the film quite a bit. And I mean, if you look at, there's something you guys should check out. It's the Good Friday Massacre, the Quebec Nordiques and the Montreal Canadiens. It's a game from April 20th, 1984, which is basically a rivalry between Quebec and Montreal, but it also speaks to the rivalry between Anglo and Franco Quebec, essentially where this is a game where in the second period, it was just fighting. You'd have the two teams.
Oh, really?
The period hadn't even started yet. And they were already, there was blood on the ice. 11 players were ejected. I think there was a total of 252 penalty minutes according to it was just insane. This giant fucking fight that there was between these two teams. And there was also the Eric Lindros. I won't call it scandal, but in 1991, he was the NHL draft. He was the first round draft pick. And this was an Ontarian who refused to play for Quebec, mostly because of his family, but also because he figured he was better than what the city had to offer in terms of marketing, but also that it was French. And he just cleared the air recently with this. He's 44 years old now. He's been retired for 10 years. And he says that the culture and the people weren't the problem, but rather the team's manager. But back in the day in 1991, the Quebec Nordiques had been like the worst team in the NHL for 3 years straight, like dead last, like not winning many games. Out of 84, there was like 28. Roughly, this team was losing money. And they saw like their first round draft pick. We can build an entire franchise around this wonderful hockey player. And he says, fuck you, I'm not playing for you. And so that's essentially what the basis for Ball Cop, Bad Cop is that thing that happened in 1991 where he refused to play with Lindros. And also... You can see that we're talking about something that is 15 years prior to when this film came out, and it's still part of the narrative where, like, there's this Anglophone that fucked us over. And not only that, I mean, the Nordiques got a really big trade out of that. He went to Philadelphia Flyers, and then the New York Rangers were involved with that, and they got a bunch of players. They built up a team for the Quebec Nordiques, and at one point, when the general manager, who basically the guy who dies in the pot house in Bon Cop, Bad Cop, is called Gros But. Well, it's Marcel Aubu, which is the real general manager of the Nordiques at the time, decided to sell the team to Colorado. And the year they were sold, they won the Stanley Cup in Colorado. And so that plays again into Quebec's psyche where they're like, they got fucked over again, where they could have had this moment of pride by having one of the teams that was basically one of the worst, and they could actually put everything was riding on this to gain some not necessarily cultural significance, but having the backbone to say, look at what we can accomplish if we stand together, like the socialist attitude I was talking a little bit. But it was the rug was pulled out from under them, sadly. And so that's also part of the film.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much of this like film was drawing on real life events.
Yeah, same.
That's all there. And in the mix of that, you have this preoccupation, where you'll have a film that has an $8 million budget that's shot at a buddy cop movie similar to Lethal Weapon, where you'll have the more unhinged character and the more proper character, where you're going to have, it kind of shows just what Quebec's entertainment industry's philosophy is, where people here don't look outside Quebec because of the language barrier. A lot of people know what Lethal Weapon is, but when you look at the Quebec entertainment industry, it's been taking advantage of people for years, and one of the basic places where they have is actually plagiarism in comedy. So you'll have repurposing American shows for Quebec audience, but you'll have the stand-up comedy scene here where I watch a lot of stand-up comedy, Americans, some Canadians, and a lot of some British people. I can't name them right now, sorry. But Jimmy Carr, there's one of them. He's all right.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the biggest there. And a lot of the stand-up comics here will literally steal jokes from, American comics like Seinfeld, Robin Williams. I caught on occasion. There was, I think there was Patton Oswalt. There was a couple of jokes that I'd noticed. You'll even have guys that are going to be ripping off Eddie Murphy, jokes that were relevant in the 80s, but they're still getting laughs today in Quebec because no one's heard Eddie Murphy say those jokes. And so you're like, Jesus Christ, guys, what are you doing? You can't just constantly be stealing from other places? It doesn't make sense. And so Lethal Weapon, like I was saying, is borrowing the stereotypes of the buddy cop movie and repurposing it for Quebec. Just goes to show, like, that Je me souviens, I remember, is constantly living in the past, where they have trouble creating something new that's going to be meaningful for the culture here. Obviously, we have other players, that are going to be great. One of the best movies that come out of Quebec is La Grande Séduction, which is Seducing Dr. Lewis in English. Wonderful film about small town mentality and how acceptance is going to be one of the prime things that they can learn. I thought that was clever Quebec film. So if you guys get a chance to watch that, go ahead and watch that. But obviously we have guys like David Cronenberg, who directed The Fly, History of Violence, Eastern Promises. And we have Xavier Dolan. Well, fuck him. I don't really care about his films. I think he sucks. But that's just me. I mean, there's Mommy. He's a very good movie, but the rest of his films, it's just a pretentious fuck. But we also have Denis Villeneuve, who was nominated for an Oscar. I don't remember if he won for Incendie. He recently put out Arrival. Polytechnique is a great film. He did Enemy. We have these very awesome guys, and sadly, those films don't work well here in Quebec. They'll work well in the United States and Canada and overseas. But a film like Ball Cop, Bad Cop will sell a lot of tickets here because it speaks directly to what the people are going through in their lives. It speaks directly to where they are, where their culture is, and it's like, this is me on screen. I get to watch that again. And so sometimes it can be fun but disappointing as well for me.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, though, because I just was unaware of all of that.
Yeah.
I guess you could sort of factor in, right, taking what you've said, Jason, and then sort of trying to look at the film after that. It's kind of weird because you've got that ending where Martin sort of doesn't become David, but he's the straight-laced guy, and then at the end he blows a dude up by slipping a bomb in his pocket and sort of does the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So you could sort of, if you were looking at it negatively, you could sort of be like, oh, that's them saying, look, the way we do it's the best way. Look, even the straight-laced guy has realised you got to do it this way. But you could also, if you were trying to sort of find the positive, you could look at it as, this Quebecian police officer and an Ontarian police officer working together, and that's how they solved the individually, neither of them would have been able to do it, but working together they did. So it's weird because you could sort of take both messages from it.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, I think that there is a positive message. I know that was heavy, I know, but when I was watching it last night, I kind of twisted my tried to take in what the movie was actually about. Like, I talk about separation and division, and you're absolutely right, Jack, in saying that if they work together, because I find that the victim in the film, the child at the heart of it, David's daughter, that's exactly what it is. I mean, work together for the kids. And I thought it was a really interesting message for them to kind of have that, where you have these two hard-headed fuckers that don't want to have anything to do with them. Like when you're in the bar and you'll have... that guy, I think is Luc Terrien, who basically, David goes in and tries to... Martin goes in and Rita is hitting on him. And, that was kind of cool. But at the same time, I would have wished... we'll get to the sex scene after, but I'll explain what the problem is with that. But... I thought that the message was good. Overall, I think it's a very positive outlook and saying neither one of these guys is right. They both have to kind of succumb and how can I put it? Compromise in the end so that they can actually have a good understanding, because things are going to get solved only if they work together. And I thought that was a wonderful message because I hadn't picked up on it the first time. I was just walked out of there. They're fucking calling us squareheads, the bastards. Do you know what that is, though, the squarehead, roundhead thing?
No.
See, he calls him a squarehead because this is a very interesting part of Quebec and Canadian history is like, I am considered a squarehead and the Quebecers are considered roundheads. And it's funny because if you translate that in French, it's tête carrée, which was the expression in the film, and in tête ronde, which you don't hear in the film. And it's just that when they were building the railroads here in Canada, you'd have the English crew and the French crew trying to work together, and the different types of nail heads. The English nail heads were square heads, and the round nail heads were round heads. And so the rivalry even back then was even in terms of construction. So he would call him, that guy's a fucking squarehead. That means he's not working with us. he has this the nails with the square heads, and so that's something that still passed on today, where you can hear it in society sometimes. Like, I'm on a tête carrée, and you're like, fuck, that guy just called me a squarehead. We're talking about something that happened 350 years ago that's still part of popular culture.
Yeah.
It's just so odd. But
that is crazy.
Yeah. And so that's it. But like the few problems that I had with the film was the sex scene, obviously. I thought that was so weird because when you'll have Rita in the bar talking to Martin, she's intrigued. She definitely wants to have, maybe a one-night stand with him. She finds him sexy because she's surrounded by all these cavemen constantly. And then you have this proper gentleman come in and she's like, oh, finally, someone with a bit of class to take me out of this fucking dump. And she's basically ready, telling him, she's so close to telling him, can you just come out in the back so I could give you a blowjob? She fixes she fixes her cleavage before she goes to see him, like maybe this will work on him. And, he's finding it okay, that relationship. But the one character that I thought was just too much in the film was Martin's sister, the blonde chick, essentially, who basically has sex with what's his face, David, maybe at the end of the second act. And so that's where it got a little bit too far with me, because the sentence that he teaches her, "Vive le Québec libre," is a sentence that Charles de Gaulle, who was, I don't know if he was president of France at this point in time, during Expo Quebec in 1967, said that, which probably launched a lot of what the race for Quebec independence was. So it means praise like free Quebec. Let's have like Vive le Québec libre is like, it's going to be great for a free Quebec. And so a lot of people misinterpreted what he meant. He meant a free Quebec, like freedom to express yourself in a place like this, live as francophones amongst Canadians. But the Quebec political party took it and they decided to spin it into, we should live free of Canada. And so that sparked the independent movement. After that led in the 70s, and a lot of what had happened with Pierre Laporte and the murders during the October crisis. It's just like, you're like, oh Christ, it gave birth to so many revolutionaries. And you're like, fucking hell, you guys, they misinterpreted it and used it for a specific cause. And so by putting that sentence in there while he's balls deep in this English chick is a bit weird for me, because you're having, how can I put it? You're having the culture literally fucked into a woman. Like he's impregnating Quebec through this Ontarian chick, Vive le Québec libre, and she's just humping away at him, yelling the line, and I'm like, that's kind of weird and inappropriate.
It's very on the nose.
Yeah. So I thought it was a bit strange to have that scene in there, because to anybody outside, like to Ontario, I don't want people to get offended by that, although it is kind of offensive in my opinion, but I'm not easily offended. I just think it's too much, like you said, on the nose.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think also it's a Quebec's wet dream put on screen, where they can essentially like say, well, if we can't convert the men, we'll get the women. But that puts it in a weird state where you're like, you guys aren't barbarians. This isn't one of those things where, you could just, they're petting themselves on the back with their charm. And you're like, I've talked to a lot of English ladies, and Quebec isn't necessarily that well thought of. And so maybe this guy is a sexy guy, no problem. But that she is this easily duped into getting fucked. And it's also misleading because he kind of wants to get back with his ex-wife as well. He kind of likes her. They have that whole thing going on. And you're like, really? You're just going to have this Quebec fucking Ontario on screen? Literally? Dude, come on.
I thought that bit was like slightly weird anyway. Like, because Martin wanting to get with his ex-wife made sense to me, because I was like, oh, we haven't seen Martin's ex-wife. He's not being like, oh, I still love her. Right. Whereas David is definitely still like, God, I want my ex-wife to go back with me, sort of thing. So it's sort of weird that you then have a scene where he just like meets the sister and is immediately like, yep, cool, we're gonna bone.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I was drunk, it doesn't count. You're like, no, you can't make up those rules. It does count.
Yeah.
Although the sister was quite hot.
She looked great naked, man. I'll give you that. That's
Yeah.
100% accurate. You know,
Yeah.
had I been the director, it'd have been a few closer shots, but
Yeah, the way that was shot and the lighting didn't do her enough favors, I don't think.
absolutely right. But the thing is that it's a very cheeky reference to Quebec as well, because what color is the lighting?
I don't even remember.
Was it blue?
It's blue. And what is on the Quebec flag?
Blue. Is it? I want to say
It's blue.
Yeah.
And everything that has to do with Quebec, whenever you talk about Canada, Canada's red and Quebec is blue.
Yeah.
And so to
Yes.
have them
Yeah.
drenched in this blue light, I was like, dude, come on. This isn't
Actually,
cool.
like, on the DVD I've got, you can select like the English version or the French version.
Okay, no problem.
And like you said, that selection is split with like the blue and red colours.
There you go. So that's it. Quebec is blue and Canada's red. And it goes with the flags.
Yeah.
And so that's it. So when it was drenched in blue light, I was like, come on, dude. This is a terrible fucking scene. You just put this in so that, you know, it was borderline if you had a bunch of Quebecers being in a screening with their pants around their ankles just jerking off to that sequence. It's like, yeah, fuck Ontario. Literally. Drenched in blue. I'm going to come blue. Oh, it's going to be great. But it's just a weird fucking scene in the movie. But overall, I mean,
Yeah.
like, the directing is pretty bad. You know, Eric Canuel has had an enviable career, but mostly in television, and I think it shows. You know, there's a lot of Dutch tilt shots going on where you're kind of like, why
Yeah.
are you framing it that way, dude? It doesn't make sense. And I don't know if you notice, there's a lot of low angle shots as well, where you're kind of always staring up at the characters. And I don't know if Michael Bay was very popular at the time and he was taking notes. Where you're like, dude, just put the fucking camera down, because there's a lot of these tracking shots, you know, or even going around the shoulders and over shoulder conversations where they're having supper around a table and he's like, this has to look like an action scene. No, just put the fucking camera down, shoulder, you know, shot, reverse shot, and we'll be fine. We don't need to be moving around. And so this guy probably had this fucking money, just like, we have money, move the camera, yay!
Yeah, but I noticed as well, like, there was like a few shots where the way it was edited, like the lighting would sort of flash, and it was just all of that, like you said, like, this is an action film. I need to remind you it's an action film.
Yeah.
So even though it's just someone essentially exiting a scene, it's still edited in this like ridiculous, actiony, flashy way.
Yeah, there's too many cuts, man. I mean, even you remember when they decide to get in the car and he decides to drive on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Well, see, how many cuts are in that fucking sequence? And not only that, there's rock and roll music playing. Now, how funny would that scene have been had he just gotten in the car, no music, and he's not driving necessarily fast, but he's just honking, kind of like what they did in The Hangover, where he's driving like, oh, you know, and he has this PA system on, hey, lady, nice rack, and, you know, that's so clever the way that Todd Phillips shot that one in the Hangover. Obviously, we're talking about years later, but you could tell that this guy was like, okay, action sequence means lots of shaky cam, quick cuts, and heavy metal music. And you're like, really? Yeah. You can't do better than that? I mean, we've seen that.
It's interesting. You just made me think, like, comparing literally just that scene has made me think of the way, like, we have Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
So bringing it all back to Edgar Wright as well.
There we go.
Where, in very different, like, thematically and everything, but you have that, like, city life versus the country life, and that kind of culture clash.
Yeah.
And again, you have that in, like, the scenes in the police car and the way that's shot to be very comedic, but shot in a very actiony way with loads of fast cuts.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with that point. It just made me think.
Well, I mean,
You could probably do some comparison between the two if you were smarter than I.
no, I don't know. I mean, I know what you're talking about. Even when you're introduced to Nicholas Angel in Hot Fuzz, the quick cuts at the beginning are well done. I mean, you'll have a lot of establishing shots. Everything is kind of centered, and so the camera is doing all the work, and the editing is doing all the work as well. But at the same time, it's appealing. Whereas this one feels like a very dirty movie. Even the transitions between the edits feel like they've come back from a commercial.
Yeah.
Where you're like, did you make this because you were thinking it was going to be a series of episodes? Or did you make it because this is the way they transition films? Because it seemed very by the book, but one of those books that was made in the 30s where you're like, oh, if ever they decide to make an action film in the future, it should look like this. And you're like, well, dude, all you have to do is watch a few movies and you'll understand that this is not the way to shoot action. You know, I mean, look at Ridley Scott when he directed G.I. Jane. All he did was like move the camera up and down and sideways. And you're like, stop. That's not the way to shoot action.
Yeah, I have to admit though, I did find this a lot funnier than I was expecting to.
Yeah, this time around I did too. But what was your favorite part?
Like, I think for me it was probably the scene where they accidentally get high, and then the scene immediately after where they're being chewed out by the kind of boss, the cop boss from
Macduff.
The French side. I think that to me was just amazing. I loved that.
Yeah. You, Jack?
How about you, Jack?
I think I'm trying to think. I think my favourite scenes probably I liked the one where they were when you have both police chiefs in the office, and you've got the English one saying it, and then the French guy translating it, and then the reveal that both people can speak both languages, so it's just totally redundant.
Yeah.
Oh, that was good. I like that too. I have to go with Liam. The pot scene is really good, where they just walk outside and they're like, the house just blows up, and they're just like, oh Christ, what the hell? I feel funny, and then they just start giggling, and then the office sequence after that is brilliant. It was like, when the other cop comes on the line, and it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
What's he saying? I have no idea. I was just lost in thought. So that was great.
Yeah. I also really liked it the first time you meet the coroner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's another stand-up comic in Quebec. He's very popular here in Quebec. His name is Louis-José Hood. And, he's sold out shows here. He's made himself fucking millions just being a stand-up comic in Quebec. And he's like that. He's the motor mouth, sorry. Just fucking talks and talks and talks. And his stand-up comedy shows are exactly like that. And so that was a brilliant scene where he's like, it's a helicopter, and he describes why it's a helicopter.
Yeah.
It was fucking cool. You're like, it can't be this, it can't be this, it can't be this. So based on this is what it's going to be. And you're like, okay.
And then I liked afterwards, and they both come out, and they're like, I understood half of it. So, yeah, I understood half of it. It's like, well, as long as we both understood different halves, we're okay.
That was a great joke. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you both give this film out of 5?
I'll give it a pass. I give it a 3.
Okay.
Because, although the message is kind of fun, I think that as a film itself, it doesn't look good.
Yeah.
To me, it's hard to watch. There are a couple of places where you're like, oh, this clearly could have been a different take, where you can see that the actors are actually acting and it doesn't feel natural.
Yeah.
And, I just felt, like I said, it felt like a very poorly made for TV movie. And so I have to knock it off for that. And obviously, like I said, to me, the whole living in the past, they could have come up with something a lot more clever than the hockey rivalry and the whole Quebec Nordiques thing and all that. That's where it started getting bogged down and this is still Quebec. It's a bit sad that we haven't moved past this. Now, the second film has come out recently. Bon Cop, Bad Cop.
I know it was coming out this year, but I didn't know it was actually out.
Yeah, it's out here in Quebec. I haven't gone to see it. I'm fearful. I saw the trailer, and it looked pretty good, but it's one of those trailers where you're like, looks like you guys put the best bits in the trailer.
Right. Because I would be very curious to see the second one after seeing this.
Yeah, you don't have to wait the 10 years that they waited here, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be interesting. Yeah, maybe we could basically tweet about it if we wanted to.
Definitely. Jack, how about you out of 5?
I'm the same. I think I'd give it a 3. But it also straddles like a weird line where, like, I enjoyed it and, laughed at jokes and thought it was a good film. But I also don't think I could recommend it to many people because there's that whole, as bad as it is, because I love watching subtitled films, and I think people that are like, oh, I don't want to read subtitles are missing out on some great stuff. But, like, the people that I would recommend this film to are also probably the people that would be like, I don't want to read subtitles.
Yeah, I get that. Like, you have this, like, almost to very broadly stereotype the sort of people that would generally like quite a dumb action film, which you could kind of read this as, or like an action comedy film, aren't necessarily going to want to also read.
Yeah, because they're sort of in it for the I just want easy laughs.
Yeah,
and for me, watching a subtitled film is easy because I'm used to it from watching all the anime and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But I can see someone being like, oh, I don't want to put in any effort at all. I just want to watch it in English.
Yeah, for me, I think it would be like a 3.5 out of 5. It would be high. Like, it just misses out on getting a 4 out of 5 because I did really enjoy it. And I think one of the reasons for that was how surprised I was by how much I was enjoying it.
Yeah. I could go up to that too.
The only thing that I wasn't massively sold on, that we haven't really discussed a lot was the kind of reveal of the big bad guy who was behind it all.
Looks like a pussy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing that was a bit like weak to me.
Yeah.
It's weird that they set up at the beginning, like, you have that whole scene where he's wearing the sort of the weird hockey mask that isn't quite a hockey mask.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh gee, what are they setting up here? What's this guy going to be? I was like, is he going to be like horribly burnt? Are we going to get some crazy
No.
like, no, it's just like, oh no, I'm just upset.
Yeah, he's just like an
Oh,
internet
okay, cool.
troll
Thanks.
looking dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, that's the funny thing is, like, you could tell, like, the influence for this film was clearly a movie like Seven. You know, he was like, oh, we're going to set this up with a really weird green color palette because green was really popular in The Matrix, but at the same time, we have to make this guy look like he's fucking nuts, so we're going to put him in John Doe style like in Seven, you know, and you're like, you don't have to do that. I wish that stereotype would die. But I think it did a little bit with the Hannibal TV show where you're like, this is very proper. It looks nice around here. You know, as opposed to just this crummy looking location.
Yeah. We've had some correspondence as well, sort of, that I wanted to wait until after we discussed the film. So Ashley Davis, who I think tweeted saying they were going to email in, they've emailed saying, beside the film you're reviewing for the podcast, what is your favourite comedic buddy cop thriller?
Oh man, that's a good fucking question. My favorite buddy cop thriller.
Yeah, the thriller's the thing that's throwing me. Because I can think of good comedic buddy cop
but
films.
Not necessarily thriller.
Yeah, adding in the thriller just throws me. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, like the one I want to go to, but again, it doesn't quite work with thriller, is Zootropolis or Zootopia, depending on where you're from.
Right.
But that's more just buddy cop comedy. There's not really a thriller element to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't picture Zootopia as a thriller.
No.
Let me see.
Would Bad Boys count?
Yeah,
Maybe. Does that have thriller sort of stuff?
I'm going to say Bad Boys too. I like the car chase scene in that.
I don't know. I mean,
It's awesome.
Liam.
It's so good that whole car stunt scene where they're chasing the bad guys along a freeway, and then the bad guys are in like one of those lorry things that has all of the cars stacked on it, and they just start like unleashing cars that are just bouncing down the freeway as Will Smith's sort of driving around them. I love that scene.
I think the ones that come to mind for me would be Shane Black's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys.
Ooh, yeah. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang is a very good pull.
I think those would be the ones, because I'm not a fan of Lethal Weapons at all. I tried watching them and I just got bored. I was like, fuck Riggs's hair. And you know, I mean, I like The Heat, but that's more of a comedy right now.
Yeah,
with Sandra Bullock. I thought it was really funny. I wasn't expecting to like that one. But I mean, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I almost provoked a car accident watching that film. I was on my way back. We were driving from Montreal to Quebec City, and I occasionally will let... I'm not a tyrant. My girlfriend drives sometimes as well, but I mean, it wasn't with my girlfriend. I was with her father was driving the car. I was sitting in the back seat because I was tired, and I had just recently bought the DVD for Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and this is years ago. And I was watching it on my DVD player, and when they have that scene with the Russian roulette, I shrieked with laughter and caused my girlfriend's father to kind of swerve with the car. And we didn't go into oncoming traffic, but he was fucking furious at me. It was like, what the fuck, dude? And I was just crying in the back seat at how much I was laughing at that scene. I replayed it. And even today when I watch Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I am overly eager for that scene to show up so I could just giggle some more. But yeah, that was one of the sequences. So those are the two.
Have you seen Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Jack?
No.
Okay, you need to. It's
on
Robert Downey Jr.
I'll watch it.
Yeah.
Will you though?
I'm picking one.
Okay.
And I'll argue it if I have to.
Sure.
I'll take Hot Fuzz.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's yeah.
Yeah.
It's got thriller elements to it.
Yeah. No, I can see why.
For the greater good.
Thank fuck, because that was all I could come up with.
It's a good choice because it pulls from so many different things. I mean, you've got elements of speed in there. You'll have mostly Bad Boys as well. So, I mean, it is an amalgamation of very many movies.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Ashley has more questions for us. Are there any other dual English/French films you highly recommend, which I think is more for you, Jason, than it is for me or Jack?
English-French, I think this was an experiment that they did to see if they can really kind of consolidate both cultures in Canada. But no, none that come to mind. You'll have, like I said, a couple of mentions that I had earlier, with David Cronenberg's films. If you're looking for a French Quebec film, that's great. There are two that I could recommend. That are one is the Decline of the American Empire, which is a movie that came out in the 80s. And that's a very good film. The director's name escapes me right now. I've got his face in my head, and I just can't remember his fucking name. Denis Arcand, that's his name. So Denis Arcand, so Arcand, and Denis is Denys. And so he made two films. I think they're separated by roughly, is it 15 years or 20 years? I don't remember. And so the Déclin de l'Empire Américain, so the Decline of the American Empire, which is followed by the Barbarian Invasions, Les Invasions Barbares. Those ones are really good, solid Quebec films that people could watch. Okay. Like I said earlier, La Grande Séduction was probably my favorite Quebec film. So Seducing Dr. Lewis, that one's brilliant. And if you guys can see Denis Villeneuve's early films like Maelstrom and Polytechnique and Incendie, obviously, those are very, very solid Quebec films as well. Those are the ones that come to mind. There are probably more that I could recommend, but they're not like Anglo-Franco the same way Bon Cop, Bad Cop is.
Yeah, I mean, the only one I can think of, and I can't remember, I don't think there's a lot of English speaking in it, but I just looked on IMDb and it does say under language French, German, and English. I think it was made in France. Yeah, it's a French film. Right. Jules and Jim.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it, no. I know what film you're talking about, though.
Yeah, like I said, I can't remember how much if that has English in it. I think there's a small amount, but that's the only other one that I can kind of think of off the top of my head.
Let's see, there's another film that I was thinking about that just escaped me that I could have recommended. Hold on. I'm just going to get the director's name. It's a film that goes back to, I think it's the mid 2000s. It's called L'Audition, so The Audition.
Okay.
And looking it up right now, there it is, 2005, with one of the best Quebec actors who is actually called Luc Picard, so Luc Picard. Essentially, it was bringing us back to Star Trek a little bit, to Jean-Luc Picard. So, and he actually directed the film. It's called The Audition, and the film is about to me, it's loose. It has an American Beauty vibe to it, although it's not. It's a guy who's going through some sort of midlife crisis, and he's a guy who's basically a bodyguard. He's a guy who goes to break legs for people that owe money to loan sharks. So he's a hired thug. But his secret ambition was to be an actor, and so, because he's slowly starting to get fed up with how his life has been in terms of breaking legs, which seems to be not that fun, according to him.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That one's a good one because you can see him going through his acting process and, what he's dealing with emotionally and whatnot. I don't agree with the end of the film. But overall, if you're watching the film itself, Luc Picard's L'Audition is a very good Quebec film as well. A good one.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to butcher the name now. What other Eric Canuel? I don't know. Films are a must-watch?
None.
Is it Camwell?
Canuel.
Canuel.
Yeah, Canuel. You can say it like that if you want. None of his films are a must-watch.
Okay.
He mostly dabbled in TV. He's recently directed a film that's in the United States. I don't remember exactly. There's a lot of people in it. You guys can look it up on IMDb, but it doesn't look good. He basically adapted. There was a Quebec TV show called 19-2, which was a police unit TV show, which is pretty brutal. A lot of people really enjoyed it here. That was adapted for English Canada and probably tried to sell it to the United States, and he was the guy who was directing it for English Canada, so 1902, but it didn't really last that long. It wasn't as brutal as the Quebec version. So Eric Canuel, like I said, he has an enviable career. He's a working director, but I can't recommend any of his stuff. This would be probably the biggest budget he's ever had. Most likely, I don't know if the new American one he has a bigger budget on, but this is pretty much it. He didn't even direct the second one, so.
Oh, fair enough. Jack, are there any of his films that you think are a must-watch?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Red Nose.
Okay.
Brilliant film.
Yeah.
Le Dernier Tunnel, also great.
I'll tell you.
The Outlander.
Yeah. Le Dernier.
I'm literally just reading his IMDb page.
Le Dernier Tunnel is actually not bad. It's with a good Quebec actor as well called Michel Côté. And he's really good. Michel Côté, he was in a film called Crazy as well that really did well here in Quebec but also internationally. About it's a coming of age story about a man, a young boy basically growing up to realize that he's gay, and how that was perceived in the 70s. And so it's a really good film with Michel Côté. It wasn't directed by Canuel. Red Nose, Le Nez Rouge was the first film that he did with Patrick Huard. So the guy who plays David Bouchard in Bon Cop, Bad Cop was in Nez Rouge as well. And that's a very poor Christmas film, where I was watching it, I remember, with my ex-girlfriend, and maybe it's one of the reasons I'm not with her anymore. It's just a terrible, terrible fucking movie. It's really, like, I thought that the directing was shitty in Bon Cop, Bad Cop. It is far worse in Nez Rouge.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, but the Dernier Tunnel is
Jack's
all right.
just recommended it.
Okay.
Sorry.
And then, lastly, what's your most anticipated summer release?
Dunkirk.
Yeah,
that does look good.
I see. At the moment, for me, it's The Big Sick. That's the one I'm really desperate
Yeah,
to
it's
see.
got good buzz. I want to see it, but it's not the one that I was anticipating. So.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's the one I'm currently most anticipating because I saw a trailer for it recently, and I knew a little bit about it.
Oh, cool.
But the trailer just has me completely sold. So at the moment, that is, but I don't know if, like, after summer, I'll be like, that was my favourite film, because I think Dunkirk definitely stands a good shot.
Yeah, Dunkirk, War for the Planet of the Apes also. That is one of the best unsung trilogies of the 21st century, where people should get to that, because it's going to be, like, in 10 years when people will be like, what the fuck? These were great. My parents haven't even watched them, and I was like, you guys need to get on top of this. This is fantastic fucking movies.
I really want to see them.
I really like them.
But because I have to do things in order, it means I have to go back and watch, like, the original Planet of the Apes.
No, man, they're not even related.
First.
Don't.
I know they're not. I'm just broken in that's what I'll have to do.
Yeah, you won't be able to convince him, Jason. This is what he does.
Yeah, I'll convince him.
Please do.
Because, I mean, listen, I have a friend who used to watch the Planet of the Apes movies because his father used to watch them. And I remember him buying the big box set that came out that had the whole ape head and all that stuff, and he
got that.
Started plugging them in one by one, and even the first film he was like, yeah, it's still pretty good, but I understand why it was on TV. And then they just got progressively worse, and it's just not, how can I put it, as an idea it seemed fun on paper, and they weren't able to translate it well. And I think that there's just this romantic idea that, like, Charlton Heston was the man every man wanted to be. And I remember watching The Planet of the Apes and going like, fuck this. This is fucking boring. It's really a waste of my goddamn time. And there are some people out there. There is a community the same way that there's a community for the Ghostbusters. And sometimes I'm just like, you know what? Maybe there's just not enough water to drown them out, because they should all go away. But I seriously, Liam, if you want to do them in order, you should start with Rise of the Planet of the Apes and then move your way into the older versions, because that's where they're leading. So these are kind of prequels.
Do it story-wise. Okay, I see.
So.
But then again, like, no one's going to suggest that you would watch, like, Star Wars Episode 1 first if you've never seen Star Wars before.
Maybe not if you've never seen it, but I suggest that order sometime.
I do.
Yeah,
I do. Saying, I do it. I don't say film order. What I do is I tell them to do the machete order, which is, you forget the Phantom Menace, but you start with Attack of the Clones, and then after.
See, I think I prefer Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones.
Oh, definitely. But in terms of story-wise,
Attack of the Clones is boring.
Oh,
Phantom Menace has a lot of trade politics in it.
Yeah, but Phantom Menace has at least like 2 good scenes, whereas Attack of the Clones has none.
Yeah,
fair. Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, if you're going for the budding relationship, when you watch Attack of the Clones first, and then after that you watch. Oh, what's the order? No, that's right. You watch Star Wars. You watch Empire Strikes Back. You watch Attack of the Clones. You watch Revenge of the Sith, and then you cap it off with Return of the Jedi. That's the machete order.
Okay.
And that's kind of cool because the prequels act as a flashback just when Vader reveals himself to be Luke's father. Then you go into Attack of the Clones and you see how he became Vader, in the middle of all that. And then you'll have both their story arcs coming to a close in Return of the Jedi.
But would you recommend that to someone who has never seen Star Wars?
Yep. I did recently, actually. There was one of my buddies that was like, hey, I've never watched Star Wars. And I was like, this is the last message between you and I. What can I do for you? And so he said, well, what would be the order? And I said, okay, watch Star Wars. I said, watch Rogue One first. Watch Rogue One, then watch Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, do Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, Return of the Jedi, and then Force Awakens. And he says, what about Phantom Menace? And I said, you can watch it whenever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't fit into the overall story. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
Fair enough. Jack, what's your anticipated summer? I'm assuming
the Emoji
Dark
Movie.
Tower. Oh, sorry, what was it?
The Emoji Movie, Liam?
Obviously. Right.
I can't wait.
Yeah, which emoji do you most relate to?
I like Poop Emoji. He's so funny. No, you were right. It's the Dark Tower. Yeah. I'm terrified that it's going to ruin one of my favourite book series of all times.
Okay.
But I'm hoping they don't cock it up.
I just don't like Idris Elba, so...
That's fine. I think it's an interesting choice putting him as Roland, so hopefully it'll pan out.
I mean, interesting is a word you could use, I guess.
Yeah, Liam, I'm so negative.
Oh, he's just a dickhead.
Whatever. Yeah, but it's not... It doesn't matter.
So thanks for the email, Ashley. I hope you enjoyed our answers. We had one final email, and that was from your co-host, Lee, who said, why the fuck wasn't I on this show?
I asked Liam the same question, Lee, and he said, no, we'll get you guys separate. That way it'll make a more contained show, which we'll be lying because we're over 2 hours now. And then we'll get all 4 of us together again. And so, Lee, just take it as a compliment that they really wanted to set time aside for you specifically, as opposed to just us sidelining each other throughout the entire episode. I think it's very flattering that they'd want to dedicate a show completely to you.
I mean, you could look at it
what
like
we're
this.
doing.
Yeah, go on, Jack.
I was going to say what we're doing is we're machete ordering our guesting on each other's shows, because we've done me and Liam together, then Jason, then Lee, then all 4 of us again.
Good call.
Yeah. I mean, the way to look at it is essentially, instead of having you just both on and that's it, there's now going to be like 3 episodes with you kind of on individually and then together.
Right. There you go.
So,
basically, we're milking your listeners. We want them to listen to us.
I mean,
that's one way
I hope they go. I hope they listen. I mean, it's going to be a long ass episode of me just fucking talking and talking and talking with you 2 guys at the other end. It's like there's dead silence. I think they went for supper and just let Jason go.
I mean, I was just learning and I was absorbing a lot of information.
Yeah. Hopefully it comes off as that. You're going to have this French Quebecer listen to this like, where the fuck does this guy live? I'm killing him. How dare he shit on our culture? And I was like, no, I'm being fair. I'm looking at it as objective as possible. I like Quebec. I've always enjoyed it here. I hate the fact that I have to wait months for movies. But other than that, it's a really safe place to raise my kids. I have a great job here. And it's a beautiful fucking city. It's actually voted one of the best cities to live in. So yay for that. I can't praise it enough.
Yeah, that's good. And if we do have like a huge Quebec audience listening, I'm sure that's just redeemed any ill feelings they might have had towards you.
I doubt it. I think there's 3 or 4 people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and teaching us a lot.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Where can people find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter at AtlanticSC. My name is Jason Michael. Forgot to mention that. I don't know if we talked about it earlier. We also have a Facebook page for the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast, and I'd love if people just went over there and gave a review. Nerd on Nerd is one of our favorite podcasts. So we're always interacting with Liam. Jack hasn't given me a follow yet, so maybe this episode will be kind of cool.
I realised that today, Jason. I looked on my Twitter and I was like, oh shit, I'm not following Jason. And then I was like, if I do it now, it's going to look like some sort of pathetic, oh, Jason's coming on, I should probably like him.
No. I just wanted to throw that out there so you feel a little bad. But that's it. They can find the Atlantic SC podcast or the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast on their podcast players of choice. So iTunes, SoundCloud. We're on Stitcher Radio as well. I think we're on Overcast somewhere. So anything that you guys listen to, we're on that. And that's it. We had a couple of highlights this season we were really happy about. Our Alien Covenant episode was so well received. We weren't expecting that because we got really pretentious on that one. Fast and the Furious 8, so Fast 8, or Fate of the Furious as it's called here in North America, got really great reviews.
That's been my favorite one so far.
Yeah, where we just went ape shit. We decided to run with it, and I couldn't believe the response we got for that one as well. And I want to say a big thank you to Reed Schmeed. I won't give her her real name because she has students out in California, and this is a very touching thing for us. She actually assigned our podcast to her college students to do a paper on.
Really?
Yeah, there's a
That's
college in California right now that was given 4 of our episodes to. They get to choose one, and they had to look at how. How research is done essentially, and how you can talk about a film without necessarily talking about a film. And so it was so flattering. I want to give a big shout out to her because that was such a highlight for us. We haven't been doing this on for a long time. We've been active for about 10 months, and the response has been great. And I mean, like I said, we've been big supporters of your show, and I love the fact that you guys were big supporters of our show as well. I like Nerd on Nerd. It's the one that I anticipate the most when I'm like, all right, let's see what these fuckers are going to be arguing about this week. It's going to be great.
I mean, I really respect the amount of research that you guys put into your show because we do not do any.
Yeah.
And it's quite nice to actually listen to a show where you sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, we do our best to sound like we know what we're talking about, but this is...
Yeah, which, you think when I have to listen to Jack every other week, it's a refreshing change.
What a slap in the face. Oh...
I'm used to it.
It's either that or he was just saying, I have to listen to Jack every other week, and so I need to dumb things down by listening to the Atlantic SC podcast because Jack's just bringing way
I think
too
we
much
both
to the
know
table.
it wasn't that positive,
Yeah,
Jason.
I don't think anyone's pulling that reading from it.
Well, that's the way
Although
we can interpret sentences.
I am now thinking, imagine, Jack, if we ever get to the stage where some college professor gives their class 4 episodes of hours to choose from.
They can do it after they do Jason and Lee's podcast. They do ours, and they go, "No, this is how you do it wrong."
No,
Now, what can you tell us about Liam's bowel movements, and what should he be eating more of?
Liam's showering less was a really good episode. I'd recommend it.
Awesome. Jack,
Yes,
if people want to tweet us,
they can do that at Nerd on Nerd.
what if they want to email us?
They can email us at nerdonnerdpod@gmail.com.
What if they want to watch the YouTube videos that I do for us?
They could go on YouTube, Liam, and they could type in Nerd on Nerd. All one word?
Yeah. What if they want to, like us on Facebook?
They could go to facebook.com/Nerd on Nerd pod, all one word.
Fantastic. And if they're on iTunes and they want to leave a nice little review and a rating, could they do that?
Well, they could, but like we said last time, we don't really understand how iTunes works. So,
No, but all the other podcasts say to do it, so...
They do. Go like us on iTunes.
I'm sure
and say
it helps
that we were
somehow.
good.
Is that it?
Yeah, I just got to say a shout out to Lee. I forgot to mention him earlier. So don't forget.
Yeah, we will be having Lee on soon.
Yeah,
We're sorry,
So
Lee.
the Atlantic Screen Connection podcast is a podcast I host with Lee Brady, and you can find him at Big Pick Reviews. Sorry for not mentioning you earlier, Lee. Mwah, mwah. Big kiss.
Perfect. Any final thoughts, Jack?
No. I'm bad at coming up with final thoughts.
What a way to round out the show. Thank you, Jack, and thank you, Jason.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye.
Liam,
Yeah?
we've got to do the fucking next time on.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were just having so much fun talking with Jason that we didn't actually, plan this podcast.
We're real good at this, guys.
What are we doing next time, Jack?
We're doing Sunstone, Liam.
Oh, Volume 1.
Volume 1.
What do you know of Sunstone?
It's the sexy comic that you keep trying to make me read.
It's not like...
It's lesbians and BDSM, right?
Yeah, but... Yeah. But it's not like a porn comic, like some of my ones I've got that I've made you read.
I've seen some of those ones you've got. They are very porny.
Yeah, this isn't that. So okay, no, because I genuinely would like it if people would actually read this. Like,
Okay,
I really.
You have said to me before that it isn't porny. You got it originally because you thought it would be, but then you actually liked the story.
Tricked me into loving the characters.
Yeah.
So we'll be discussing Sunstone. If a comic about BDSM, and lesbians sounds appealing and isn't, I promise it isn't like sleazy. Like, we're not going to be like recording this with our trousers around our ankles. Like,
we don't do that anyway.
What?
Jesus.
Yeah, honestly, would recommend it to everyone listening right now. Go, read, enjoy responsibly, and then email us your thoughts.
Bye.
Bye again.